think mine's right.
Okay. Ready?
Vaughn Anthony,
Ready?
is your microphone? No, but
I want to welcome everybody to the regular meeting of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors for this November 4th, 2014. If you'll stand with me, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Praise to,
We entertain a motion to acknowledge certificate of posting.
so moved.
second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. This is time for public comment. It's the opportunity to address the board on any item of interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken unless provided by Government Code Section 54954.2. Do we have any speaker cards?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Marty Richmond from Hollister, and I'm wearing my, as I usually do, my veterans cap today. And so November 11th will be Veterans Day, which used to be Armistice Day, and that'll be a week, I think a week from today. And there'll be a lot of celebrating, and there'll be a lot of things going on at Vets Hall, so I wanted to remind everybody to go down there. And today is Election Day, and today is I call it Equalization Day because everybody gets equal vote. People often say, I can't afford this, and this person gets that, and this person has this benefit, and he has this friend, and I don't. Well, today's the day when everybody's vote counts for one. So if you've registered, and I hope you have, make sure you vote. And because there's a relationship between Veterans Day and your ability to vote. I know it's pretty corny, and we don't do corny stuff anymore, but in a lot of ways, the veterans fought for this country and died for this country so that you have the privilege to vote. And if the Board of Supervisors passed a law tomorrow saying 50% of the people can't vote, the public would be up in arms, and they'd be down here with pitchforks and flaming torches. But 50% of them or more are not going to vote, because they're going to have something better to do. If you don't like the candidates, go down, exercise your franchise, and put an empty ballot in the box. Write Mickey Mouse. Doesn't matter what you do. Take a step. Maybe next time you'll get prepared and be ready to vote for somebody or something that you believe in. If you don't, I find it difficult to believe that you have the right to come up here and criticize everybody who did. So go down, say your piece with your ballot. Thank you for your time.
Marvin Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Board, thank you for the time here. I agree with Marty. If you don't vote, you shouldn't complain. So I voted a couple of weeks ago, so I'm gonna complain. Hey, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Control completed their 5-year study last week in Stockholm. It'll be hitting the press. It had irreversible consequences of global warming in there over 40 times. Irreversible consequences of man-made global warming. They neglected the fact, not hearsay, the fact that global warming hadn't happened since the El Nino of 1996. We've had a near constant global temperature for 18 years. I mentioned this at the Board of Supervisors last night. They have their government class from high school there, and I commented to them that, you know, unless you're an old senior, 18 years or older, I said, there's been no global warming since you've been born. I don't know if I'd registered with them or not. They had to be there. It was a mandatory attendance on their part. But anyway, all the global warming models that were issued, 20 years ago. Global temperature is now at their confidence band, just about to go outside of their confidence band. Maybe it'll start warming up again. Ice pack, you've seen the graphs on the ice pack in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. The last 35 years of measurements from satellites. Northern hemisphere ice is back up to about a third of the way up. A couple of years ago, it was very low. And the southern hemisphere, right at an all-time high, even though they're in the period now where it's beginning to decrease, but it's still at an all-time high for this date. And that where was Columbia, South Carolina, had snow on November 1. It's never snowed that early before. But in any case, the IPCC has put out their report, and they're saying that there's irreversible consequences. So we've got our folks here in California, our Air Pollution Control Board, Monterey County Air Pollution Control Board. They'll be taking steps to decrease the global warming that we hadn't had for 18 years. Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to department head's announcement. Mr. Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have a few announcements this morning. One is out of our Behavioral Health Department. We have our Director of Behavioral Health, Alan Yamamoto, here to discuss an item that came on your agenda October 7th. I wanted to give you an update with regards to ambulance service in our community. Alan?
Yes, as you recall, at the last meeting that I attended, there was some discussion about ambulance services, specifically non-emergency ambulance service, providing transport both for psychiatric patients. And then later in the discussion on agenda, there was a reintroduction of the topic about non-emergency transport services for clients that have a medical diagnosis that are not an emergency but are required to be transferred to another facility. Two somewhat separate issues. But they do overlap. So I've been doing further research on ambulance services, non-emergency. I've been in contact with AMR, Doug Petrick, the general manager, who spoke also at that last meeting. I've also been in contact with Central Coast Ambulance. I've been in contact with Freedom Transportation in Monterey County that does medical transport. I'm acquiring the numbers, the dollar figures, in terms of what transports might typically cost. And of course, as you might imagine, they vary depending on distance. And then trying to quantify the degree that we would utilize such transport services is a key figure to come up with as well. And as you know, emergencies are unpredictable. So we can look at track record for what that's worth, come up with some estimated figures. And then ultimately, I think we need to have a dialogue with the hospital. My intention is to include CAO Espinoza in that dialogue and to talk with hospital administration, because questions arise about who has the fiscal responsibility for the patient transfer. And I think I have already alluded to the EMTALA, E-M-T-L-A acronym, better known as Patient Anti-Dumping Law. So there are some legal aspects to consider. We do have attorney representation for consultation purposes through CSAC, the California State Association of Counties, Risk Management Insurance. And we do have a very good expert on the area of healthcare law to consult with. I've known her for many years. I will ultimately consult with her as well. That being said, there are 58 counties in the state, and if you've seen one way of it being done, you've probably seen one way, in spite of what the law may say. And ultimately, we have a shared responsibility with the hospital. We know that. And we want to work out a compatible solution with them. So that's where the progress is at this point. I have spoken with Rebecca Jones, who spoke at this meeting previously, Director of Emergency Services. She knows that I am researching this issue. She has also shared with me that the hospital is researching the issue as well. So I'm very pleased that we are mutually working towards trying to find a solution to this problem. And I have very good hopes that we will come to a mutual conclusion about what we do decide. So that's where we're at.
Supervisor Barris.
Thank you. Ellen, thank you so much for that, because I know that the community is very concerned about that. And I just want to know if we will be bringing it. Are you prepared for maybe a December meeting to bring it for further discussion? Or is this something that we'll have to wait till next year?
Well, I will be prepared for a December meeting in terms of the information that I think I need to obtain, and I've already received a great deal of it. There are only a few pieces left. prior to having a discussion with the hospital. So presentation at the December meeting would be dependent upon the outcome of that discussion, the scheduling of that discussion.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure, I have received several phone calls on this. People want to be here when that is discussed, so that was why I needed to know if we plan to have it in December. I can let folks know so they can be here.
Yeah. I'll give you a heads up on
Okay.
it if we can put it together by then.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Alan, for your work on this issue from the last meeting. You've done quite a bit, and I'm very satisfied with the information you're bringing forward to us at this point. I could see that it's going to take quite a bit more, work and effort to try to secure that type of transport and a working partnership with the hospital district as well. We certainly don't want to commit to too much cost for too little need, but there definitely is something that we have to work on, and at this point, I'm happy that you're on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alan, I do appreciate it because, especially in my district and from personal experience, somehow San Bernardino County just, it's not in line. I mean, that's the best way I can say it. And I'm glad that we are actually moving in a positive direction that can facilitate and provide needs to a lot of these families, especially in crisis. That's the least of the concerns, especially when they have a lot of things in front of them to deal with. For example, a 5150 or some other situation. Ambulance is something that they don't even think about. They think it's an automatic, and I understand there's fiscal consideration that needs to be applied to the discussion. But at least at the surface level, the policy level, we're discussing it, and that's important. So I commend you for that. And I know out in the community sometimes, we think we're real slow. We're not friendly. And I have gotten a lot of calls too, such as Supervisor Barrios too. And I do appreciate that we're actually moving in a positive direction. I just want to think positive on the matter.
Thank you.
And move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate the work you're doing on that as well. Yeah, we have another announcement. It's coming out of our auditor, clerk, elections office. This is going to be presented to you by Joe Paul Gonzalez. He has an announcement today.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Supervisors. Today is Election Day, as you know. I just wanted to announce that our election facility, tally facility, is going to be is at the Hall of Records, and staff created this diagram of how the ballot transport, once they close, we close the polls at 8 o'clock, how the ballots will be brought into the facility. This is the downstairs. This is the entrance on Monterey Street for the Hall of Records. This is the downstairs. What was the old courtroom? I'm calling out the Hall of Records. May have confused you, but the ballots are brought in here. There's a kind of a facility here where a table where people will be directed, where to take the live ballots versus the provisional ballots versus the other equipment that needs to be stored. There's an area here where the public can sit down and view the whole process. We have 3 tables where once the ballots are brought in, they're checked to make sure that they don't need to be duplicated in some way, because sometimes people put X's instead of lines, kind of thing that happens. And so they'll be checking those that the machines, and these are the 2 machines here, the 400C machines, those are the tally machines that you purchased to tally the ballots. And the good ballots will some of them will go to the designated red machine, and others will go to the blue machine. This is where the ballots that need to be duplicated in some way, that they're not going to the machine, they're kept separately from the blue machines, kept separately from the red machine. There's a separate entrance for the blue machine and red machine to come back here to store the ballots. So it's a very well thought out process that was meant to ensure the accountability of all the ballots. Our staff, Angela Curl and the rest of the staff. Mike Parsons actually created this layout map along with a lot of help from staff to decide how best to store the ballots for security purposes and to ensure transparency, because that's really our goal, is to make sure that the public feels that the election process is as transparent as we can possibly present. So, we're putting the facility unremodeled yet to good use. As you can see, this, it amazed me how we were able to do elections in the past without having this, the facility to be able to do these things. And we had to do them in ways that, unfortunately, didn't lend themselves to this kind of a layout. So I just wanted to inform the board that tonight at 8 o'clock, the polls close, and we'll be, beginning the process at that time. Of course, right now, all the polling locations, we have 20 polling locations. Well, actually, 18 polling locations, and then there's two boards at 2 locations. So we're on our way to. I'm sorry, members of the public. I was showing the board. This is the hall of records downstairs. Again, this is the Monterey Street entrance, and this is what was the old courtroom. Here's where people are seated, be able to see the whole process. And here's the tables where the ballots will be revised, will be verified to make sure that they're readable by the machine. Here's the 2 400C machines, and here's where the storage, after the ballots are read, they're going to be stored in here, in this facility. It's all locked doors. All the stuff that is not ballots, that are like the readers on the DRE readers, those will come through this facility, come back here, and will be stored back here. Because as you may know, those votes that are casted on the DRE machine have to be verified as a separate process. So while they'll be read on election night, we need to verify those votes. So does the board have any questions?
Joe Paul, is there a significance in the difference of the color of the 2 machines, or is that just?
It's just for the audit process, just to
okay.
verify, when we go back, that that it's much easier to be able to say, hey, these were counted by the blue machine, these were counted by, cuts it in half.
Gotcha, okay. Any other questions of the board members?
So, Mr. Gonzalez, how many absentee ballots have been turned in? What's the latest number?
Well, as of last night, there were 6,500 absentee ballots turned in. Those will not all be processed today at 8 o'clock because, we have to verify signatures, we have to, have a precinct board open them up and, make sure that they're going to be readable by the machine. Any duplicates will have to be made if that's, and I use the word duplicates, it's really to ready the ballot for the tally machine so that the machine can read it in the format that it can read the ballots. But tonight we should have around 5,500 vote by mail ballots that will be read at 8 p.m.
Super. Supervisor,
So how's it going so far this morning? I read somewhere that you anticipated only 45% voter turnout, and I just find that so hard to believe. I would think it would be quite a bit more, especially with this election, with some of the races and issues that are on the ballot. I would think that,
I don't think it's going to be that low. Originally, I thought it was going to be that low, or lower, actually. But because of the different measures, because of the different races, there will be a higher voter turnout. If you look at it, just with the 6,500 votes, absentee votes that have been turned in, that's already almost 25% of our registered voters who have turned in the ballots. So, I'm expecting over 50% voter turnout.
yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And good luck to all the candidates tonight. It's, it's a election day is always exciting, and it's a fun process, but it's also a very stressful one, so, anyway.
Not all of them will have good luck.
Not all. Some are going to lose. Mr. Chair,
Maybe more than some of them.
he's done.
Other ones.
If I could, I just want to commend the staff. You asked the question, you wonder how you did it without the space that you have, and I know how you did it, and I've said this before. We are very fortunate in this county that we have staff that just, steps up to the plate and gets things done in every department, and so that's what's happened. And so I commend them for being there and helping us through some really tough times.
Thank you. I will relay that message to my board, to my staff. I tell you, I'm just so proud of the staff and the work that they do. They really are a credit to the county.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe Paul. Those are all the announcements that we have from the department heads.
okay, we'll move on to board announcements. Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I just hope that people do take time today to vote. This is a real important election in Samuel County for a number of reasons, and it's all our civic duty to go out and make our vote count. And so really want to encourage everyone to do that. And also, next week is Veterans Day, and it's never too soon or too late to thank a veteran for their sacrifice that they've made to our country, so we can go out and vote and voice our opinions in peace. So certainly, I hope everybody goes and see the Veteran Day festivities in Hollister, and look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you.
Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I personally want to honor the veterans in our county and throughout our nation. I have 3 veterans in my family. My husband and 2 brothers served in Vietnam at the same time. So that was a pretty tough time for the family, and fortunately they all came back. My stepdad is a veteran as well, so I really want to take this moment to honor all of them for serving and for the job that they have done. And I also want to remind folks to go out and vote. This is a very important day. It's very exciting. It's especially exciting for me. I have 3 family members that are on the ballot in some district or other, and so very exciting time for me, and we're certainly going to have a party. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rivas?
The only announcement I have is we did initially meet our committee related to the gray water ordinance, the potential gray water ordinance, and the landscape ordinance. There's really not much to report, but we did have the initial meeting, and certainly like local governments and bureaucracies around the country, it's going to take some time. It was great to have the discussion with staff and talk about all the hurdles that stand in our way. But I think that we're all optimistic that we certainly want to, as far as the gray water ordinance and as far as landscape ordinance, these are 2 ordinances that could save a lot of water in our county and with the city. And so we hope that, I think we're going to plan on meeting again in November or this month, and so hopefully we'll have some more to report soon. And then, yes, please go out and vote, everybody. As my colleague said, it's always important to vote. I'm kind of I'm upset because I teach a couple classes, and I don't, I just got overwhelmed and real busy, and so I reminded my students to go out and vote today, and a lot of them are, but about a third of the classes didn't even register to vote. And so I'm kicking myself because I could have, we could have registered them to vote. But at least, they understand the importance of voting, and so I anticipate that they will register soon. So thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Last night we had our Vets Commission meeting, and the Boy Scouts of America actually did a beautiful, what do you call it, our chairman, beautiful
Fine.
sign at the vets in honor of the veterans. It included all the departments from the armed services of our nation, and it's very beautiful, and I hope they can make a presentation to the Board of Supervisors because it's something we can be proud, especially of our kids, the Boy Scouts. And also, Veterans Day is very important in our family, too, because we actually have 2 nephews that are actually in the armed services right now, and one of them is actually in Iraq. And the other one is about to be deployed, maybe to Alaska. I don't know why, and pretty soon we'll have another nephew that actually will be joining the armed forces pretty soon. So we're always thinking of them, and I totally agree, Supervisor Barrios, Supervisor Batalo too, that when we have loved ones out there, we always think about them, especially during this time. So make sure we go out and vote today because of them. We're able to vote today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to also give my thanks to the veterans. I've been asked to make the announcement that the ceremonies will start at 11:11 in front of the Vets building, and a parade will follow at 1 o'clock. I'd also like to take this time to thank all the people that talked with me as I have been walking for the past year, talking about the issues, being involved in our democracy, and who will be getting out and voting today. I just want to thank all the people that will take the time to vote today. And we as a community, after this election is over, needs to come back together. There's been some divisive things on the ballot, and we have to remember that we live in this community together, irregardless of how the outcome of the ballot is tonight. So just want to put that out there to everyone. With that, we'll move on to consent agenda. I have been asked to pull items 3, 4, 9, and 13. Is there any other item that any member of the board would like to pull?
And Mr. Chair, I just wanted an explanation. Number 12?
Number 12? And do we have any speaker cards on any item on the consent agenda? Would anyone from the public like to pull any item from the consent? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to item number 3.
I pull that, Mr. Chair, because it shows on the AIT that the evening of Thursday, November 15th is the event, and it's actually Thursday, November the 13th. And I know it's showing the 13th elsewhere, but I want to make sure that the community knows that it is on the 13th for Philanthropy Day. On the recommended action is where it's got the date of November the 15th. It should be November the 13th.
Okay.
Okay?
Any other questions or comments from the member of the board? Anybody from the public like to address the board on this item? What's the pleasure of the board?
I will make a motion to approve the proclamation declaring November 13th as National Philanthropy Day in San Benito County and authorize the chair to sign the proclamation. And it will be presented in the evening of Thursday, November 13th, at the event at San Juan Oaks Golf Course.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to item number 4.
And I believe I also pulled that one. Let me see what my notes are, Mr. Chair. Oh, it's just wording. It said that something was approved. Something was improved instead of approved. It should be approved. And that would be item number 20 for August 5th. So it's just a word choice. So I will ask that that be changed, please.
Any other comment by a member of the board? Any comment or questions by a member of the public? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of August 5th and September 23rd, 2014.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to item number 9. And I'm the one that asked to have it removed. Mandy?
Hi. Good morning.
Reading this over, I know attachment A is the work to be done by the one that receiving this grant money. Can you just go into more detail of exactly what they will be doing for us?
Sure. As the board may be aware, when we applied for this grant, we applied for it in collaboration with the California Product Stewardship Council and also with their partnership with several other counties. So basically, they will be helping us contact businesses and doing the outreach media, in terms of advertising, whether that be print or TV, radio media, to get the word out about collection of, specifically, we're looking at gas cylinders, fluorescent tubes, collection of more batteries, things like that. Things that are harder for people to, or people don't generally think of as being recycled, or it's not convenient for them to recycle them at this time.
So it's basically it's an advertising campaign?
Well, public education is just a component of it. They'll be setting up, like, I'm going to use this term, like a collection station, for instance, and if one or two, or hopefully all of our hardware stores are interested in participating, we would set up a collection station, let's say for fluorescent tubes. You go in and buy one, you bring in your old one, so they don't have to wait for the third Saturday of the month to bring them in. So they'll be helping set those things up, and taking care of the disposal contract with, whoever it is that will be collecting those things.
Okay. And then the grant was for 68,000 and change,
Right.
and then this contract is 56,000 and change.
Right, so the difference is for us for overseeing them and any other incidentals that may happen for the
Okay,
county.
very good. Any other questions of the board members? No. Any questions from members of the public on this item? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those
Thank
opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mandy. We will move on to item number 12.
Mr. Chairman? Just a very simple question. Why didn't we give it to a local vendor?
Thank you. Joe Horwell, Director of Public Works. We actually tried. So we started with the GSA contracts, both state and federal, looked at what pricing we could get through the state, and then we went and talked with the individual local dealers. And so we actually did reach out to Greenwood for pricing. They said they could not achieve the price that GSA was offering for that vehicle. And then we did talk with my Chevrolet out of Salinas. They could beat that price. They did it by, I think it was $50 or $100. So it did keep it semi-local, but we did try first here within
But
Hollister.
don't we have a, Ray, don't we have like a 5% allowance for local vendors?
Honestly, I don't know. I'd have to look that up.
And if it's $100,
do.
if it's $100, I'm willing to bet for the community to give it to a local vendor.
And we do have that, Supervisor De La Cruz, but I don't know if it's for items. It may be for service. I'm not sure, but we do have something. I know what you're referring to, and we probably need to look at it.
So let me clarify. It's $400 is what my Chevrolet is able to beat the price that the federal government contract is for. Greenwood did not quote us a price. We told them what the price that GSA would have had. They said they couldn't come close to beating that, so they said, go elsewhere. And then when we went to my Chevrolet, they beat the federal price by $400.
So it's a wider gap than $400, so what you're
Yeah.
saying, from the local.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly how much Greenwood would, what their lowest price they could have gotten to is to see if 5% would have made a difference or not.
It's hard. Okay. I think my only thing I could bat for the local vendor is that 5% of that vendor preferred. It's about the only thing I could, say, hey, we need to revisit that item.
I think that's a fair conversation.
Can
a
we
lot of
delay
communities
this
have.
until you look into it and see if they can fall within that group?
We don't have a pressing need. I don't need the van like next week, though they do have long lead times to them. But to defer it to the next board meeting, the December board meeting,
Yeah.
we could reach out and see if 5% made a difference or not. I'd be
Yeah.
willing to do that.
Can we do that, Mr. Chair?
If you make the motion.
I'll make the motion to delay to the next meeting for you to look into the preferred local
Okay.
vendor.
Okay. We just need to also invite the public. So any other board members have any comments or questions?
Well, I'll hold back my motion then.
Well, only that there are other dealerships in the community.
Absolutely.
Other than what is the one, Greenwood?
Right.
Yeah, there is another dealership, so you might want to consider them as
Well,
well.
in this case, we were looking at the configuration for the van, and so in this case, Chevy is normally much more competitive than Ford is.
Oh,
On the other heavier trucks that we've been to the board for and pickups, Ford is much more competitive in that they put a better product out that is in how the bidding works at the state and federal level. And so we do move back and forth based on what we're actually buying for.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, we just want to make sure we're giving everything we can do to keep the business local if it's at all possible. And hopefully, the dealerships here locally can see that, it's not, we just don't buy one vehicle a year. I think this is the second one, in the last 2 meetings. And, hopefully they have to make an effort as well to kind of be competitive too. So I'm supportive of what Supervisor De La Cruz's motion. Just see if we could do something locally, but certainly support what you're doing as well, Joe. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody from the public like to address the board on this item?
Marty Richmond from Hollister. Someone just asked me an interesting question. I don't know the answer, so I'll put it to the board, and I'll take my answer sitting down. Does the county pay sales tax on this? And what would be the tax difference if we buy it somewhere else? Because there's some rules about the taxes flowing back when it's a vehicle. On other things, the taxes don't flow back, but there's very complicated rules that if the taxes don't flow back. And I assume that you would garage it, the address you would give for where it's garaged would be out of Hollister, so you wouldn't have to pay the extra 1% tax. I just think it's very complicated. Somebody needs to draw it up someday. Since a vehicle is $30,000 or something, and you buy 2 or 3 of those a year, that's a lot of money. Someone needs to put a little chart up so we see how the tax flows, because that might have, in other words, paying some more money, you may wind up getting a lot of it back in taxes. I don't know. Thank you.
And yes, the county does pay sales tax on the vehicle, so in the case of the van, the sales tax, assuming we went to my Chevrolet, would have been $2,368.70. The county gets, I think, 1% of the 8 and some change. So like 12% of that number comes back to the county, which in quick math is about $350.
Supervisor Patello?
Well, see, right there, you got two accountants, and a couple business people up here on this board. I don't know where we put Supervisor Rivas in this, but I'm sure he figured it out. And that's something that we should take into consideration. If the sales tax, you minus off the, and it comes right back locally, whether it's to the city of Hollister and us a portion, we keep that money here, so that kind of goes against the bid, or should go against the bid.
Correct. And that's
Okay.
part of the rationale of why local preferences are given and allowed to be given.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we table this to the December meeting to get more information.
I second,
The December 2nd meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
and I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to item number 13, and I need to recuse myself from this item for the possible perceived conflict of interest because the contractor has been involved in my campaign. So with that, I'll turn this over to our vice chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure who I pulled it, but Joe, I think
also had a
you
correction
were
I
also
needed.
going to
And I-
pull this
and I
item,
Pulled it too, Madam Chair.
and you pulled it too. Okay, we'll start with you, Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you. Okay, just, I guess, educate me on this one. When we first put it out to bid, no one submitted a bid, right?
Correct.
And then you guys came back to the board and said, because there was no one submitted a bid, please allow us to go in a different direction. Now you have this contract. I guess my question is, what's the difference between back then and now that we actually have someone?
Correct.
What has changed? I guess that's the question.
So I have not talked with the contractor directly, but I did talk with Armand this morning, was kind of playing 20 questions with him. And so what I would attribute is to two things. And I talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting when we rejected the bids. We did do a short bid window, and that was one of the questions the board had, could we have done a longer window? And because of our desire to get this project done this year, before the end of the year, and meet our commitment to the city, we consciously went with a shorter contract window. So it was a little bit of a decision as staff we made. Through that process, we went through and we're contacting bidders as kind of that end of that window was opening or closing, and not seeing a lot of interest on the bid. We started calling around to see, what's going on. Are people aware of it? Are they interested? And what we were finding out, and we talked with Lone Star, Juarez, Don Chapin, Granite Rock, Nicholson, and Brigantino. So those are all local firms kind of in the region that we called out, reached out and said, are you interested? Want to make sure you're aware of it. What Armand tells me is part of the Brigantino bid is that they were aware of it. They were generally interested, but they were very busy. They looked at the window of where they were getting a quote in on, I think it was a Monday it was due, and where their staff that does estimating, they weren't available to get it in that time frame. So they looked at it and just said they weren't going to spend the time to try and rush to get it done. So they let it pass. I think that was the case with probably a couple of the others, but we really didn't get solid information from people of why didn't you bid. Recognizing we didn't get any bids in, is we went back out and started calling around again and saying, all right, is there any chance you'd be interested? We really need to get this project going. And so we did get the one proposal back from Brigantino that put forward what we thought was a bid that it followed all the specs we put out. It went through and stayed in our budget and our schedule. And so we looked at it and talking with county council of what the requirements are under state law, it fit within that. And so, in a perfect world, we probably would have went out for like a month of open rather than, I think it was 2 weeks that we did. But again, we were just looking at calendar and running out of time between the end of the year and kind of having to jump. And so that's why we did what we did.
So, thank you. So, did the price increase? No, it's still the same.
Yeah, it's in the ballpark. We had an engineer's estimate. They're within that. It's like a $5,000 range. They're, I think, pretty much in the
Well, I
middle
guess
of
that's
that.
not the right question to ask. I mean, I'm trying to probe into this. Because if we would have gone the other traditional way, we would have gone to the lowest bid. In this new way, we actually just call somebody and says, hey, you know, we're desperate, you know, we need this. So I guess the bargaining power got shifted from us to them when the moment we say those buzzwords, and I just wanted to make sure that there's no value increase or cost increase from us to them by going in this traditional method.
Yeah,
And that's my concern. My other concern is that, did we give the other vendors an equal opportunity to say, okay, we're going to, it's different now. We you know, let's talk.
yeah.
Was that afforded to the other vendors
Is that
too?
Armand was going back and calling around, seeing if people were interested. And I think some of his earlier calls, when asking companies were they interested, there were a number that said they weren't. It's just the scope of the work, and I talked about this at our last board meeting. It was very specialized in the electrical, but it was a very low dollar value. And I think in this bid, it's $2,000 out of $45,000. So the things that we wanted, the specialization was a very small subset of the larger piece, but under state law, I'm not allowed to bust it apart. I have to do one project. And so that's, I think, all the baggage that comes along with a low-value contract with a lot of different sub-trades and, you know, all the normal state stuff that kicks in that we have to live under a prevailing wage,
Right.
And the reporting and that. It's a high overhead piece of work for somebody, and if you're already busy, it's not worth the brain damage.
So sometimes it's probably better just to hire a general contractor per se and let that person subcontract out the work.
Yeah, and it's essentially what was going on in these
Yeah,
cases.
I
but-
kind of figured that out.
And I think, you know, going back to the conversation about the van, this is one of the value of investing in companies that are in your community, is that on a large multinational, you know, or statewide company, they're not going to waste their time on a project like this. I think in this case, you had somebody who, it's a local company, they've been involved in events going on and, you know, supporting activities in the county, and I think they're doing it in some ways out of a favor to us. You know, they really don't need the work, and we've got a really tight timeline for them to perform on a busy schedule, but.
Because the
you know,
city has required certain timeframes to be met.
well, as we promised, that we would be off city water by the end of the year, and I really want to make sure we deliver on that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. My question, Joe, was that it appears on the, let me see what the title of this is.
The resolution.
On the resolution, that, that it was a sealed bid. And I just want to make sure that we clarify that, because it really wasn't.
Right.
Right? And so it's worded as such. And so we need to make sure that that's.
Yeah, so I have some
Good.
suggested wording that I would like to read into the record. And then also, the thing I wanted to note is, in our recommendation that got picked up, it shows it as $46,500. The contract's actually for $46,550. So I just want to make sure we had the right number in there.
Okay.
And that is in the packet, in the contract, that right amount. And so we just
All right.
transposed a number. So I would recommend that, whereas number 4, that we would strike no contractor and strike out where it says which said bid and, let me go, actually make sure I get it there. Proper, my old eyes. It goes, whereas the County of San Bernardino did cause notice, so that makes sense. Whereas the contractor in response to such notice, I would strike the contractor, so it would say, whereas in response to such notice, no contractor submitted to the Board of Supervisors within the timeframe specified in the notice and in the manner specified or provided therein a sealed bid. So that would clean up the top, noting that we received no bids. And then I would add 2 whereases to acknowledge that we did use the different state process. And so I would call it whereas 4A. Whereas following the bid process conducted in a manner provided by law, the County of San Benito canvassed potential contractors to solicit a qualified contractor, and 4B, whereas the contractor submitted a bid to the county that met the plans and specifications prepared and publicly distributed.
Okay.
And then it would go, continue that to the next whereas.
Yeah, and as long as council is okay with that wording, we should be okay with that.
Yeah, I talked with Barbara.
You did?
Or I mean
Oh,
with Shirley.
With Shirley. Okay. Any other supervisor comments? Not right now. Okay. Any comments from the public on this item?
I'm going to prove my perfect record since I brought up what do you call it, sales tax. Marty Richmond again.
Morning.
I do want to comment one thing about breaking up contracts, especially contracts of this size. In addition to the state law requirements, there is a real danger in breaking up contracts, and I think we've seen that. You get a lower price a lot of times in the bids, but by the time all of it's over, you wind up paying twice as much as the contractors sit around and point at each other. We've had that with the roadways, where they sit around and point at each other, I know that, in the city, and say, it's not my fault this is not working, it's his fault. You hired him, let him do it, and arguing about whose fault it is. The advantage of having a general contractor is you only have to beat on one person's head to get the job done, and when they come in and start complaining that the guy who put the tar down or put the curb in didn't do a good job or didn't get it, they say, that's not my problem, that's your problem, you're the general contractor, you should have taken care of it. So what happens is sometimes you get a lower bid when you break it up, but in the end you wind up paying a lot more money. And we've seen that time and again on these roadway contracts where they start arguing about who didn't put the drainage in right, and wind up with Caltrans sitting around going, I don't care who did it, it's your problem, and then we got to sort out the different contractors. So that's another good reason, if possible, not to break up contracts, because I'm not sure it's worth the bargain you think you're going to get. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board.
I guess I have a comment. It's just, when you look at these things and kind of how this all kind of transpired without, a couple more bids, I just have a little bit of sticker shock. Laying out the pipe is, better than $19 a foot, but, which is a lot of money. I guess that's what the bid came in at. But on the other hand, I've worked with this company in the past, and they do good work. They know about irrigation, and this is what they do here. And so I feel comfortable, with this contract and them, making sure it's done in a professional manner. So I'll support this. It's just going into the future, I'd certainly like to see it going through that bid process that we had talked about at the last meeting. So thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Okay,
any other comments? Yes.
Yeah, Madam Vice Chair.
CEO?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, this has been an ongoing item on our agenda back and forth. We were actually requested by the city to get this work done the beginning of this fiscal year. So I wanted to publicly say thanks to the city for allowing us to work through this and get to where we're at today. And hopefully we can get this done within this year. So that was all I want to say.
Okay, thank you. And I have to agree with Supervisor Botello. My husband and I are in this business, but obviously we wouldn't bid on it. But we also had sticker shock on the amount per foot. And but we thought, this really is a reputable company. They know what they're doing. We also do business with them. We trust them, and I'm sure that they're going to do a good job. So.
And just to clarify, the price per foot includes restoration of the parking lot, because we are trenching through a parking lot to run the big 4-inch lines through.
I'm glad you said that, because my husband asked me about that. Like I said, we're in this business, and
that's a big difference.
I couldn't find that I couldn't find that they were doing that in the
This is
scope.
restoration of asphalt.
So maybe with that clarification, I feel better.
Yeah.
Do you,
Oh,
Supervisor
yeah.
Botello?
Yeah, and one other thing I didn't see here, and because when we read this, it's over the weekend or prior to day before the meeting sometimes. But I didn't see where, do they have a deadline, timeline as
Yes.
far as completion?
Yeah, it's in the front, they have a mobilization date, and then also, where did I see? It's right up on the top.
Because with this company, sometimes you have to have
Yeah.
that
So-
deadline date.
They are required to commence within 15 days of the notice to proceed. My goal is the notice to proceed is either today or tomorrow, and then they have 20 working days to complete the work.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. So
So we got damage damage clause?
We didn't put liquidated damages on this. You know, again, it's part of, we're trying to,
I understand.
we were trying to get
I understand.
people to take the work. We talked about it.
I concur with Supervisor Botello, but just, you know.
Okay. It looks like we've got all the answers to our
Yes, thank you,
questions.
Madam Chair.
And I will entertain a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Can you clarify with the
Absolutely.
with
I
the
knew you were going to
motion?
say that.
Well, with the changes to the
Correct.
resolution.
Correct. I make a motion that we approve the contract with Brigantino's Irrigation, changing the amount from 46.5 to
It's
46.
$550.
$550, remember it was $50 difference, effective November 4th, 2014, and authorize the interim Public Works Director to execute the contract and issue change orders in the amount not to exceed 4655.
Or 55.
Second.
Together with the change in
Together with the changes.
paragraph 4?
Yeah, to the whereas number 4 to add 4, 4A, and 4B.
Inclusive of that statement.
Okay. There's a motion and a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We can go ahead and get Supervisor Munzer.
I want to take a little walk.
You got it? Okay.
Getting a cramp.
You know what? Why don't we just take a 5-minute break to make that change? And we'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, with them, you have to have a deadline. Oh, yeah, don't get it.
Yeah.
Shoot, I'd be.
Yeah, I believe it. Hang on a second. Yeah, I believe it is. It's under,
Okay, so did we just take a break?
Yeah. Somehow you need to get together and talk about this. There's something I must be doing that's causing.
So this time it's not you.
It's not me? Oh.
So we had a power outage Friday, and that reset this unit, and we were doing this as a proof of concept. So it needs to be renewed apparently. So this one ain't on you, and we're gonna have you use Ray's connection here for
Can I
the
go to
day.
his email thing too?
Oddly enough, no.
I figured that much.
I drilled a.
Sometimes they'll do it as a separate, call it separate. It's built into those. No, we talked about that. You don't want to put it on the we were so far. But I mean, yeah. We actually lost.
Hit my car. So,
Oh, here you go. All right. Oh, shoot.
Okay, if we are ready to continue, Supervisor Rivas needed to step out for a minute. He'll return promptly. Ready to move on to our public hearing? Mr. Espinoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're on item number 17 this morning on our regular agenda. This particular item is to conduct a public hearing to consider names for a new frontage road constructed near the Red Barn facility off of San Juan Road and 101 area near Aromas. So today we have our interim Public Works Director, Joe Hordell, here to discuss this item with your board as well as the public. Joe?
So thank you. There is, as a part of the construction of the new Prunedale interchanges, as I noted in staff report, Caltrans has built new roadways, and one of those is a roadway that is split between Monterey County and San Benito County. The entrance to the roadway starts in San Benito County and it finishes in Monterey. That's because of where the interchange actually sits. Caltrans had asked Monterey County to put a name on the street, and so in working with the Monterey County Public Works staff, bringing this item before the board. Under the highway codes, there are provisions for noticing, and we did post out on the roadway hearing notices of today's meeting. The staff is bringing forward a proposal of Red Barn Road. We believe that that is an appropriate means of recognizing this destination, especially coming from the north of the facility with the new interchange, that coming up on the interchange would actually allow customers of the facility to see that that is the next exit to go to without encouraging more billboards and similar type of off-premise advertising. We think it's an appropriate means of recognizing the near history, or at least the cultural history, of how people recognize that building and what it means to the area. And so staff is recommending that the board adopt Red Barn Road as the name of this new street.
Okay, is there any question or comment?
I have a
Supervisor?
question. Joe, it says here that you contacted the owners of the Red Barn. And are those owners the same name as the road proposed by Monterey?
Actually, I'm going to go and ask Supervisor Patella
Yeah,
to help me out here.
Yes, the current owner is lineage of the family of the same name, and we do have a representative from the Red Barn that during public comment, I think he'll kind of elaborate on that information for you, Supervisor.
Okay, so Mr. Ellingwood's family still owns the Red
A
Barn.
descendant.
A descendant
Right.
owns that. Okay, and they would rather have the Red Barn Road name on that road. Is that what
And that's my understanding of
that's our
that. And then, as noted in the packet, there is the letter from the supervisor in Monterey County asking for a different name that is the original owner and builder of the barn. But from our perspective and staff, is we felt that that really had no connection to the public of anything that's occurring on that location and in that area and what people know it as. It really would be lost, I think, in the rest of the world.
For 50 years for me, it's been the Red Barn area, so, okay, thank you.
Supervisor Patella?
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to express gratitude to our interim Public Works Director for taking the time and going out there and meeting with the people from the Red Barn and getting a handle of the history and how that project has been developed. Being that it is in my district, months and months ago, the owners requested that I would consider bringing forward that name if given the opportunity. This project, I have followed it very closely as it kind of bridges, our two counties. It's a tremendous improvement for the 101 and San Juan Road, as well as Cole Road, as far as safety in that area. And we're just, most importantly, very pleased that it's done for the most part. There's few more items for that project to be completed, but we're at the point where you know, I was approached again as far as supporting the Red Barn Road, and I gave my word. I told those folks that I don't see any issue with it. That's how I recognize the region myself, as the Red Barn, and I think it's just a common sense approach to the new frontage road. I know my counterpart in Monterey would like to name it something else, but you know, and I had a conversation with them, but, you know, I explained to them I already gave my word. And I think it's not that big of a deal one way or the other, but I think it's appropriate that we name it the Red Barn Road. I know there's a representative from the Red Barn here that he'll make a couple comments and maybe answer any questions that the board has and during public comment, and I'm very supportive of what the staff recommendation is. Thank you.
Mr. Bears, yes.
If we go with the Red Barn Road, does that mean that part of it will be Red Barn Road and the other part is going to be Harry Ellington or Ellenwood Road?
Staff would hope not, and one of the things, I've been in close communications with the Public Works staff in Monterey County as of yesterday, and I told them I would let them know what our board did with the decision, so that would go to Monterey, so they would have the benefit of that. I'm also hopeful that first, that we're bringing it forward first in kind of order, as well as the sign that goes on the freeway is tied to what the name is on our section of the roadway, and so, you know, really is the relevant piece of that. But my goal would be is that there is one name and not a change at the city-county boundary.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, with that, I will open up the public hearing. Do we have any speaker cards? Would anyone from the public like to address the board on this?
Hello, Mr. Chairman and board. My name is Manuel Delgadillo, and I'm the Vice President of Stagecoach Territories, who owns the Big Red Barn. First of all, I'd like to just quickly, just a little quick history. In 1945, the Kaiser Company built the 20,000 square foot aluminum structure for free to help advertise the company's lightweight material. So the 22,000 pounds of aluminum that was used to build the structure, and it was at the time dubbed the world's largest hay barn. It's a freestanding structure, so there's no poles in the middle. That's what makes it kind of rare. In 1967, approximately 20 years after Harry Ellingwood had the building built, Fran Ellingwood, his daughter-in-law, purchased the building from the family and quickly painted it, had it painted red, bright red, against the wishes of the county. They didn't want it red. So she had it painted red, and it remains, after 46 years, continues to be operated as a flea market, as it was when she purchased it. In 2010, she petitioned the Monterey County Historical Resource Board to have the 20,000 square foot building deemed a historical landmark due to all of its different historical facts and what have you for the county. Just another quick, a really quick story. Being a private pilot myself, I had a conversation with a local pilot by the name of Daniel French from Watsonville. And he noted, these were his words, he had recently relocated to the area, and he recalls a flight from Harris Ranch in his single-engine VFR, that's Flight Visual Rules, from Harris Ranch to Watsonville. And he recalls that after passing Hollister, a large front had formed, and being a VFR pilot, he was unable to continue and was going to have to divert to Hollister, an unknown airport to him. And after scanning the area for landmarks and referring to his FAA map, he noted a big red building, both on his navigational map and on the ground. He was able to follow San Juan Road after finding this and referring to his map. He was able to follow San Juan Road and was safely guided to Watsonville Airport. Those are his words. He was able to do this because of this great big building. I have a picture of what the original building looked like. This is what it looked like when it was originally commissioned by Kaiser. It's gray, old, what have you. And I think this is a fair representation of what we see out there now. Sorry for the digitized picture, but it was the best I could do in such a short notice. It's a big red building that we all have come to realize and recognize is a big building, and I think that giving what we know of it and how we remember it as being a big red building, I think it's only fair that we have the road named the Big Red Barn. So the owners, as well as the two remaining heirs to Mr. Harry Ellingwood, support the Big Red Barn Road or Red Barn Road, and they oppose the road being named Harry Ellingwood Road. Thank you. And I can answer any questions if you guys
Do you have
have.
any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to comment on this? Seeing no other, I will close the public hearing. What's the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion from the board, I'll move to approve resolution number 2014-91.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. With that, we'll move on to our regular agenda. Move to item 18. Mr. Espinoza?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, your board has directed staff to come back once every month to give an update with regards to the general plan, and the year is coming very close to an end. So we wanted to, and really getting close to our deadline, so I wanted to have Byron Turner, our interim planning director, give you an update, and requested Michael Groves to come here as well to give an update. So we have Byron Turner here.
Yes, thank you. So, as the CAO mentioned, I'm here for the monthly update. The last few times I've been here to update you, my message has basically been Michael Groves and EMC have been working on it. So this time we thought we'd bring Michael and here to let you know what we've been doing, what he's been doing, the company, and where we've been and where we're going, and update you on the timeline. So with that, I'll give it to Michael.
We're working on it. Is that good enough?
You're not getting out that easy.
Michael Groves, President of EMC Planning Group. Thank you for inviting me. Mr. Chairman, board members, I do have a handout. And the handout is in the back of the room on the table if the audience wants to take a look at it. And I'd also like to request that this handout be passed on to the Planning Commission so that the Planning Commission also gets the same update, so that there is some consistency as we go down the road on the process of the general plan. If you take a look at the handout, it's basically, what have we done, what are we doing now, and what are the next steps. And just as a reminder and an update, if you remember, we kicked this off in February of this year. And oftentimes in general plans, you talk about general plans, and it was February of 4 years ago for you guys. But for us, it was February of this year. And that was our kickoff session with the board, and the board gave us some direction about some things that they weren't happy with in the general plan update process, and gave us some direction about things they wanted to see changed. March 19th, we had a joint Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission meeting. If you remember that meeting, I thought it went really well. We went through the general plan and some of the changes that you had asked us to make, and went through it chapter by chapter, and actually looked at various lines, editing, things that needed to be changed, maps, landowner requests, and all of those types of things. We also got a request to put in some quality of life policies into the general plan, and we were able to do that. At the May 6th Board of Supervisors meeting, we asked the board to lock the general plan in and hold it for the moment so that we could begin the EIR process, and that process began as of May. The next item on this list, and you see it's late August, is the AMBAG model, and probably the issue about why we're behind schedule in my mind. It took us a while to get the AMBAG model. We didn't get it until the end of August. We were anticipating we'd get it in June or early July at the latest. And that AMBAG model is the model, the traffic model that helps us get through and understand the traffic distribution on a regional basis and in the county. So we wanted to make sure we had that information, and we hired the firm Hatchmont McDonald to do a peer review on the previous general plan EIR traffic section. And they did that peer review and are in the process of that peer review. But one of the things they wanted to do was to review the latest update of the AMBAG model as a part of that, or otherwise we would have had the review done, then the model would have come out, and we would have been inconsistent with the model.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I have
Yes,
a question.
yes.
And I see on the handout that you passed out, and that's, it also states that, and the San Benito County model. Where does that come from? And are we asking this consultant to look at two different types of models and come up with some sort of composite conclusions on it to implement into our general plan revision, or how's that working?
Yeah, it is. You said it exactly right. The AMBAG model is a regional model, so it looks at a 3-county area, and the distribution that takes place of traffic in the regional model is typically not very accurate for a local area. So the San Benito County model, which is a model that has been used by the COG, has been looked at as well for the local area. The San Benito County model only looks at the distribution within the county. And so it gives you more accurate information about how the distribution occurs on various roadways within the county than the regional model. An example of what we would consider an error in the AMBAG model was a lot of the distribution was showing traffic going on 129 from Watsonville and on Highway 101, and it wasn't showing what traffic was coming down Highway 25. It wasn't showing some of the traffic that was on 156. It was really, the distribution was more centered towards Monterey County and Santa Cruz counties. It's hard to explain, but in layman's terms, it's basically, it was not distributed correctly in our view of it, or at least our traffic engineers' view of it. Not in all cases, but in some cases. Okay, so so what happens is if you combine the two models, you get a more accurate distribution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, on that notion, I know that the board made a request or a motion to request to COG to reconsider putting Highway 25 back on the constraint list. It's not happening, at my understanding, at COG, and the representatives of COGs are here. They could express their position on it. Will this delay the process? Will this delay the general plan moving forward, knowing that COG somehow has put a temporary stop on it, or they haven't decided yet? As we wanted in terms of timing, is there some conflict of timing there? Oh, potentially?
It's a good question, and I was hoping you wouldn't ask any questions about Highway 25 today, but since you did, you know, I'll just give you an opinion from outside looking in. Highway 25 is a very important arterial in this county. It needs to be upgraded. It needs to have the attention of this county and COG in terms of, you are in the process of doing a general plan update, and that general plan update is going to add housing units and population to your county. You have to have infrastructure to support that increase in housing units and population. That part of that infrastructure is Highway 25. So I don't know if I can accurately answer your question about the timing of it. I think the timing is post-haste. I think that the board should be taking action to push Highway 25 and get Caltrans on board, figure out some alternative designs, and move that action forward today. I said it in May, when we had the hearing in May, I said it. How you want to move that forward is your call and COG's call in terms of the process. Obviously, that process is going to require some additional funding mechanisms, like a sales tax measure or some other funding mechanism. So that's probably where the delay really is, because you have to figure out a strategy about how you're going to go about that in this community, and whether this community is going to accept that or not.
But doesn't that also change the formula on how much we can charge for traffic impact fees, especially if it's 25 is on our list? Because knowing that the city council actually also did a resolution to move forward with the Highway 25 concept. So isn't there some
Yes,
kind of inconsistency there?
It does impact that, and we've talked about increasing the impact fees in this county to support the major improvements that you would want with regard to your arterials, your collectors, and the various streets that serve the community. So yes, I agree. It's going to impact the impact fees, and it's going to increase the impact fees, and it's going to impact how you go about raising other funding for major improvements. But I think all of that is doable. I don't see it as I see it as always a difficult process because there's nothing that doesn't have hurdles, but it's all very doable if there's a community leadership and support to get it done. And I think it's important that the community recognize that they can accomplish anything they want to accomplish if they put it out there, and it's going to take probably 10 years. I mean, I don't know if you saw the articles in the paper about what you were just talking about, that whole corridor of 101. That conversation started 20 years ago. And that whole corridor from Salinas through Prunedale started, well, it's actually 20-plus years ago, I'll say. And you know, the Board of Supervisors was just talking about it, the Monterey County Board of Supervisors was just talking about it at the last board meeting about how 20 years ago we started this conversation. We thought we could get it done in 5, right? And here we are 20 years later, but we finally got it done. And I don't think Highway 25 is going to get built in the next 5 years. I think it's going to take time.
I totally agree with you on that concept.
But you need to start someplace.
And I feel we have started. COG is doing the RFP to do the impact, the traffic impact fee study. We're in discussions with Caltrans because we cannot afford, as a community, the options that are before us now. We have to get Caltrans to be at the table with us, and I believe they are coming to the table. We have to redesign the project down to something that we can afford and be able to build in 20 years. Because the project that is out there is a 50-year or 100-year project before we could ever afford it. And by the time we raise the money for it, it will have double or triple in price. So we are working at COG. We are trying to get a plan that's affordable for our community and will work for our community. And not end up raising the impact fees back up to where it kills development again totally. Because if we do that, then we're not going to have that money coming in.
Yeah,
So we need to get this general plan done. I don't see why, whether 25 is on the constrained list or the unconstrained list, is slowing down the general plan. I'm also a little concerned about the San Benito County model. I don't remember ever directing you to use the San Benito County model. I'm a little concerned by that.
Yeah, I don't think this board did direct us to use the San Benito County model one way or the other. I don't think it was part of the conversation. But what we got into it with the traffic engineers felt that it was important to look at distribution on a local level. So part of that was an internal consultant staff
Very concerned
decision.
about where this San Benito County model came from. Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you. You know, you talked about leadership, Michael, and my mic isn't on. Sorry. And I think where that leadership should have started is that back on August 5th, and I know since we're on the subject, I know you didn't want to talk about it, and it really has nothing to do with you, but since we're talking about it, we made a request as a board to put 25 on the constrained list. And I believe at that time, this is 3 months later, we still haven't addressed it through COG. And I know and I respect our representatives at COG that they want to make sure that we have the funding mechanism. But on that resolution, funding mechanism doesn't have to be specific. All it has to do is say that we want to put it back on so that Caltrans know that we want it back on. As a county, we're leading that charge. And so I'm upset that it isn't there yet, because a resolution can be very general. And the county and the city both said, let's do it. But anyway, that's besides the point, and
And let me just say, the statement that Chairman Munzer made is absolutely on the money. You have to come up with an alternative plan. I agree with you, and I think the COG board is pushing towards meeting with Caltrans to get an alternative plan. What I've said is similar to what you've said, and that is send the message.
send the message, exactly.
And so while you're doing the plan, coming up with an alternative plan, keep sending the message to Caltrans that you want to move forward with this. And maybe that's happening and I'm not aware of it. So again, it's hard for me to speak. I'm looking from the outside in, and all of you sit on these boards, and it's your discussion with Caltrans. But I would just continue to encourage you to have that discussion, because there are alternatives, and I brought it up at the board, the alternative, and I brought it up at the COG board as well as here. The alternative, using the existing lanes and creating 2 more lanes, is a 4-laning project. That's a completely different cost in terms of project, much less. And as you said, Chairman, it's something that can get done in a reasonable time frame versus what you're looking at in terms of the design that's on the table now, which is probably not going to ever happen.
And then the other issue is, if we went to building 4 more lanes like the proposed 156, then we're going to have a county road with how many miles of a concrete barrier going down the center of a county road, which will end up being a frontage road. So we have to use the 2 lanes that are there and the improvements that have been made there already. Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, and this is for about, is at least the 3rd time that Chairman Munzer and myself have reassured this board that we have put this in motion, and we don't need a resolution from COG. Staff doesn't believe we need a resolution. Caltrans doesn't believe we need a resolution. Nobody believes we need a resolution from COG. The board was clear for us to work on it, and we're working on it. We need a redesign, and you could pass a resolution about putting a man on Venus, and that's just about the same damn thing. But we have to work with Caltrans. We're already starting with stakeholder meetings to see if we could do just that. We talked about putting 2 lanes side by side all the way through for 25. That's the only way we could afford it. And then it needs to be phased. Then we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And it's not that simple, just raise a 1 cent or 2 cent, 5 cent sales tax to pay for this thing, because there's a lot of people in San Bernardino County that don't use Highway 25 or don't feel like that's something that they want to pay for. So we have to convince the public that some of this is support our local roads, our city roads, our county roads that are falling apart. So a portion of that sales tax needs to come back for other road maintenance needs. And it's very, very complex. And we're working on it, and the staff is dedicated to it, and there are things you're not aware of, Mike, and that we're working on. So there's nobody that's saying that we don't need to do this and we don't need to do it now. But you have to define a project that the public understands and is willing to support and pay for. And it's a combination of impact fees, and it's have to be a secondary sales tax, or other, a toll road. I don't know what else is out there, but this should not, and I support Supervisor Chairman Munzer, nothing should slow down this general plan. 25 is an important issue. You can move forward with it as time goes on, but it better not be slowing up the general plan.
And I'd just like to say that I don't think any of this will slow up the general plan. The thing that was slowing up the general plan was really trying to evaluate the traffic impact. And that's something that was done in the first EIR, and there was some holes in the analysis. And then on top of that, we got a new AMBAG model that showed all new regional distributions. And so we needed to evaluate that as well. So that was really what slowed it down. And there hasn't been anything that any board member has said that I don't disagree with. I just think it's really about the message. And I totally agree, and actually said it at the COG board when I spoke at the COG board several months ago, that Supervisor Patello's bringing forward this concept of the sales tax measure, and the fact that the sales tax measure has to go beyond Highway 25. It has to be local roadways. It has to support the full community when you're going after something like that in order to get the type of support you're going to need. So I don't disagree with any of the things that you've said. And, you know, so far, simple general plan update presentation has turned into a Highway 25 debate again. So
As always.
Hey, that's the flavor of the day.
we're just starting to have fun now.
That's just the beginning.
All right, so on this list, October 2014, and it's actually started before October, but we got authorization from staff. We started having a conversation with Todd Engineers, who had done the water evaluation for the general plan during, when we were not involved. And it was never really completed. It was a draft, and it wasn't completed, and then some things had changed over the course of the last 4 years, so we felt like we had to spend some money to go back in and have that revised. So we did that to get it updated so that you have some security as you go forward with your environmental document, that you have some legal, technical information to move that forward.
Yeah, I have a question right there, too, because I know Todd Engineers, they work pretty closely with the San Bernardino County Water District, and so that information is coming there, and the governance committee, we had a report from that the whole committee, the members of MOU are doing a new study for the water assessment needs. Is this kind of a goes hand in hand with it? Are you familiar with that, Mr. Gross?
As far as I understand it is, this will basically give you a summary or caption of what's going on in San Benito County right now, as of this year, essentially. So that's our goal, because what we had in the document was not only draft information, but it was older information. So we've tried to capture the new information. If there's something that we might be missing, please let me know.
Well, I think this is a good process that to evaluate, some of this water, and then, as time goes on, and if we get new information, of course, you kind of amend your old data.
Right. It'll need to continually be updated, particularly with our water situation. So, and then you can see just May through October, it's just kind of a summary that we've been working on the EIR revised sections, as we've talked about. We've sent a few sections to Byron to review. He's looking at some of the policies and implementation measures, mitigations that we might have as a part of that process. And as I said earlier, the thing that's held us up essentially is coming down to what are we working on now, and that's September through November is the traffic, air quality, and climate change section. So what happens is, because of the model delay of getting that and then having to evaluate it, and then once we got into it, we found some problems in the modeling that we didn't understand, so we had to go back to AMBAG and kind of talk about those things. We've got a good sense of it now, but you can't do air quality and GHG until you have the traffic done. So we had to do it's kind of a linear process, not running them parallel. So we're now finishing up traffic, and we're also in the throes of air quality and GHG, and should have those done in the next couple of weeks. And we've got two consultants working with us, Hatchmont McDonald, their office out of Gilroy, and Ascent Environmental out of the Bay Area is working with us on those. So that's what's going on currently. We're finishing those up. What will happen after that, essentially, is we'll finish up those peer reviews by mid-November, and the sections, rewriting those sections by mid-November. And then we'd like to see the general plan get out on the streets as a public review document by December. If you look at the schedule on the second part of the second page or the backside, you can see that we're hoping to get the document out in late November, early December for public review. And then the public review of the document will happen between December and January, so over the holidays and then into January. And then we're hoping to be before the Board of Supervisors by March, Planning Commission probably in February. We have to obviously do a response to comments and create a final EIR and then we need to write a staff report, resolutions, findings, and evidence for the Planning Commission and Board to consider, and then your public hearing. So I would assume the public hearing for the Planning Commission will be in February, and the public hearing for the Board in March. It could be that both hearings are in March, but that's really our drop-dead date at this point in time. So I apologize to the Board. We are 3 months behind schedule, essentially. 3 months behind schedule, because we wanted to finish up by Christmas time of this year, and what we're doing is we're having all the documents finished by Christmas time and getting them out on the street, but we're not going to have in front of you for approval by then. There was one other issue that was raised by your Public Works Director and Byron as a part of the process, and they have running into some problems with the inconsistencies in the county regulations around roadway classifications and design speed criteria. And this came up in looking at improvements on Fairview. And we went back and looked at those and recognized that there are some inconsistencies in, not really in the general plan, but in the regulations that come out of the general plan, your implementation steps. And so your ordinances and criteria are not all consistent. So we're recommending a policy and associated implementation measure in the general plan that will have a direction to clean those up. They can get cleaned up, and they need to get cleaned up just to help facilitate some of these improvements.
Michael, if I may ask, Mr. Chair, will those then be done also at the same time that the traffic reviews are done?
Right. We'll add the policy and the implementation step to the general plan and bring that back before you as a correction item to the general plan, or as a part of the mitigations. It probably won't be a mitigation because it's really not an environmental effect, so it'll probably just be a correction to the general plan. And then there's going to be, as you know as board, there's going to be some things you have to do after the general plan's adopted. There's going to be zoning, there's going to be some ordinance changes that need to get made, and there'll be a laundry list of things, and we have been in the throes for the last 2 years of doing that with Monterey County after they adopted their general plan, doing all their implementation ordinances and that type of thing. So I don't see that your list is as long as Monterey County's list. It's a shorter list, but there will be some things you need to do and allocate some funding.
Even with the changes that Public Works and Byron brought up, we would still be in the same time frame.
Well, you're gonna have to do that implementation after the general plan's adopted. You could do it now.
Implementation will have to be done,
Right.
but it will not affect the adoption of the
No, it
general
won't
plan.
affect the adoption
Okay,
time.
that's
No.
all I needed to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it will not.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I'm just had a heart attack 3 months behind, and there's a lot of people that need this thing out.
I know.
Sooner than that. And just off the top of my head, is there any way, is it illegal to have this, if the Planning Commission's having the public hearings in February, why can't we have this public hearings parallel with them?
Well, we can set it up so that you can have the public hearings soon thereafter, but there are legal noticing issues, and there's also, we want to get their recommendations. Remember, they're a recommending body, so they're recommending to you any changes they want to see, or whether they're happy or not happy with the mitigations and those types of things. So it's a little bit of a linear process, although we can look at the noticing times and put them one right after the other. And we've done that before, where maybe a planning commission meets at the beginning of the month and the board meets at the end of the month, and it's in the same month. But we'll have to see how it falls out in terms of timing. But we can write the staff reports and set everything up for those approvals ahead of time as we're going through and preparing the final EIR. In fact, that's our plan, is once we get through the public review period, we will write the final EIR, but we'll also be writing the staff report and all the findings and evidence and all the things that you'll need for your adoption by resolution.
And there's no other areas that we could kind of trim off some of this time and catch up?
Yeah, I mean, really the time to trim off is right now, and it's just as soon as we can get the traffic and the GHG and the air quality sections completed and get those to Byron, and as long as he gives us a thumbs up, we can get it out on the street. That's
because
the place to cut.
The air quality issue, I know that the herds of cattle in San Diego County is down, so the air quality is better, you know. But,
Which model are you talking about?
yeah,
The one without the cows?
So is there any other questions?
Any other questions of the board? Okay. Any questions from members of the public?
Marty Richmond from Hollister. You know, I'm disappointed that on election day, we're getting back into this political wrangling over 25. We will know the answer on what the people want at 25 tomorrow. Everybody knows that when the election's over. So why are we going through this? I think it's bad form to do it, to get the EMC. They can speak for themselves. This is my personal opinion. I think it's bad form to get them involved again in a political debate. And that's all that is. That's the reason we're here a year later than we should be. Frankly, I think it's terrific for them to be, quote, 3 months behind. I think that's amazing, considering how little help we've given them on the political realm. I'm not talking about the planning department. This is my personal view. I think the fact that we don't know where we want to go, that we're split not down the middle, 3-2, we're split 3-2 on how we want to proceed for the future, makes it damn near impossible for anybody to write a general plan around here. That's just my personal opinion. And so I think they've done a terrific job of moving it along under these constraints. And I know one thing about I've seen on the Board of Supervisors is that for some reason people get elected and they throw their mirrors away. They never look in the mirror and say, gee, it's my fault. No, it's never my fault. It's always the other guy's fault. You know, I remember some comments about this two-bit consultant and that two-bit consultant, okay? I think they've done a great job, and if we can come in 3 months late, considering all the rigmarole we've been through, I think it would be truly amazing. And they could hang that up on their wall as a badge of honor. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, just comments on the original draft, the one that came out, earlier this year, and you had your matrix in there. This is required, and there was some optional in there. Best I remember, when you get old and feeble, your memory's not as good as it used to be, but the environmental section was in the natural resources, and that portion was optional. The one about the climate change, since we heard earlier that we hadn't had any climate change for nearly 20 years, and that it might help, Michael, if you could get the board to go along with just deleting that optional part, and your rewriting would be less. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address the board on this item? Seeing none? Any other questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I just hope that maybe staff could kind of look into seeing if there's any way we could kind of trim that timeline is back. I know a number of my constituents that have projects kind of on hold, their businesses, jobs, and they're pretty dependent to see this kind of move and get approved, but if that's possible, we appreciate it. Thank you.
I think this was just to receive the report. Byron, Michael, thank you for the report. Mr. Espinoza, we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Michael, and Byron as well. This particular item, item number 19 on our agenda, it's with pleasure that we're able to come before your board this morning. Lima and the county have reached a collective bargaining agreement, and the information for us. There's some highlights for your board on page 244 in your packet that include the employer contribution at the PIMFCA minimum plus a flat rate dollar cafeteria contribution. The actual rates can be found on page 248 inside your packet as well. There's a couple other things I wanted to highlight to your board. One was the total employer contribution is capped without any automatic increases. We also have before you sick leave payout was reduced 25% for employees hired on or after 10/1/14. Again, this will be ratified when all of the other groups actually move forward with that. There are a few other items there, as you can see. So I think there was some great progress. I want to thank staff, our negotiating team, as well as the law enforcement management unit for working together over this last year. There's a lot of work that went on with this. So we have Ellison Hawk as well as Georgia Cochran here to discuss this further or to answer any questions that your board may have. But we're here before your board to, in essence, request that you sign off on the MOU agreement and authorize the county administrator or my designee to make any technical edits as later identified. So I don't know if Georgia would like to come up, or Ellison, say a few words, and if not.
I just wanted to thank you for working through us with this. Law enforcement management really stepped up and really came through on this one. It was a good negotiation session. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there any questions from the board?
No questions, just a comment to thank staff and to thank
Yes.
you, your organization, your company.
Thank you.
We've come a long ways, and it didn't happen without the cooperation of both sides, and that's what negotiations should be. So I want to thank law enforcement group and, like I said, staff.
Certainly, yes.
For where
Staff
we're at.
and
Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from any member of the public? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
I will make a motion to approve per staff recommendation, resolution number 2014-92.
A motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to item number 20. Mr. Espinoza?
Yeah, this item actually ties in hand in hand with item number 19 of this morning's agenda. The item is basically requesting your board to adopt a resolution adding Lima as a separate unit for the health insurance contribution, fixing the employer's contributions under the PIMFCA Act. So we have Georgia Cochran, our interim HR director, here to add any further comments to that and to discuss this item. Georgia?
I don't think there's too much more to add. This is just to effectuate the changes with respect to the new MOU. And it's a CalPERS formality. They need resolution showing exactly what we're doing. And first you have to adopt the resolution accepting the MOU, and then the second act is this.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the members of the public? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve Resolution 2014-93.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Espinoza, we'll move on to item number 21.
Thank you. Yes, item 21 is coming out of our Health and Human Services Agency, and CSWD actually recently received a grant from the CDBG drought to provide rental and utility assistance. We have Jim Riding Sword here, our HHSA director here, to elaborate further with these funds as well as the activities that are associated with this. So, Jim?
Yeah. So actually, there's several grants that we're asking you to act upon today. The first one is a $500,000 grant from the Community Development Block Grant for drought assistance for rental and utility assistance. We just need to get this put in the budget. We're actually doing the activities already. We have gone out and asked people to come in, and we've had pretty good response of people coming in for this type of assistance. The second is a $60,000 grant from the County Services Block Grant to provide water assistance, bill assistance. Again, this is to get the money into the budget. We're doing the activity. We have had people come in. We're covering both water and sewer. That was a question that came up at one point in time, so we're doing that. Let's see. And then the third grant is $59,541 from Community Services Block Grant to implement the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. This is free tax assistance for low-income people. One of the nice things about this is that if low-income people have been working, they're eligible for what's called an earned income tax credit from the federal government, which can actually increase their income by fairly significantly during the year. So we want to make sure that people get that because it helps low-income families to do a little bit better. The fourth is a $54,793 grant to provide scholarships for children and youth for recreation and enrichment activities. And then the fifth is an increase of $273,865,000 to our CalWorks allocation. This particular increase is one that was passed by the legislature during the last session, and it expands subsidized employment programs across California and in San Benito County. Connected with this, we're asking for an additional staff person to be able to work to help people connect up between themselves and employers who might want to take advantage of the expanded subsidized employment allocation. So that's what we're asking for today. It's a total of $948,199. And if we can get these into the budget, then we can begin to move forward and get all of these activities done. I'm particularly excited about the subsidized employment part of this.
Are there any questions or comments from Supervisor Botello?
Yes. Jim?
Yes, sir.
A couple questions I have on two of the types of grants. The first one, the $54,000, it's you stated that they're for scholarships for children for recreation and enrichment activities. So so a person would come in, a parent, presumably, into your department and ask for, I want my child to be able to go to YMCA or some youth program,
Yes.
and then you just cut them a check, or do you? How does that work specifically? And why isn't it better maybe to, through some sort of approval process, to allocate that directly to a youth activity nonprofit?
Well, to begin with, we have to tie it to a low-income youth. And secondly, the payment process, I'm not sure, but I think that we make the payment process directly to the organization.
Okay, so it goes directly to an organization. That's good. That's
Yeah.
The second one that I have on the water assistance. I know a lot of people in my district are very challenged because of the high water rates in both cities, quite frankly. And I would assume they have to prove their income level as well as the cost of their water. And is that on a month-to-month basis? And do we have some sort of maybe I don't know, maybe a requirement that for them get in touch with the Water Resources Association that do a kind of an auditing? You have low flow toilets or faucets that are a little bit more water conservation minded. Is there a way that we could tie in them working with other things to help lower their water costs.
Okay. I think that's a three-part question.
Yeah.
The first part is, yes, they do have to show that they meet the income criteria for this particular grant. Second is it's a one-time payment. I think it's for up to 3 months or 6 months, I'm one of those two. And the third thing is our staff, when they talk with people who come in with this, do give them information about water conservation.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, thank you. My question was along the lines the same as Supervisor Botello on the scholarships to children and youth for recreation and enrichment activities. And Jim, just for, maybe for future, if you could give us a list of who your partners are. I'm envisioning that maybe children would want to, let's say, participate in a music program. Those can be quite expensive, that maybe they would be helped through high school, junior high school programs. And like you mentioned, YMCA, maybe after-school activities, that sort of thing. So I would like to know who the partners are and who we're, not who we're helping, but how we're helping these families.
I will ask staff to send you that list by email to you and the CAO.
Okay, very
Okay.
good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you. Actually, Supervisor Rios and myself actually serve on the Gang Task Force Committee, and I know that it's the Hollister or the Sheriff Department is bringing back the PAL,
Yes.
Police Activity League, and I just hope that somehow some of these monies that are going to the kids for recreational activities, that PAL will develop a relationship with you, Jim, that they will work together with you, because it could really benefit everyone in the community. PAL, and I'm willing to bet that this is going to target low-income kids, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if PAL can come in and play a more of a sponsorship role and bring these kids into the program, will be a win-win situation for the entire community. In reference to all the other ones, which I serve on the Home Loan Committee,
Yes.
and we actually talked about exactly what Supervisor Botello's points he has brought up today, and we totally agree with you, Supervisor Botello. I think that we need to refocus how we can enable them instead of just giving them, helping them 1 month, and there's no investment in them in terms of long-term investments, such as educating them, financial education. Build a foundation in which that hopefully they don't come back to us and say, I need assistance. It's more of a helping them to long-term educational program. And that conversation was brought up, and I know that sometimes people, like the Supervisor says, it's a challenging situation. I totally understand that. However, we should take that opportunity, because once they come into the boards and ask for assistance, that's an opportunity we can all work together as a partnership and help these families, making sure that they don't come back and ask for assistance. Sometimes families just, they don't have the means. It's totally understandable. There are moments that we're going to have those in everybody's life, but there's other moments when once an opportunity they come to our office, that's a golden opportunity in which we can work together on partnerships to how to help them, besides paying their rental assistance, their water bills, PG&E, electricity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to comment on this item? Seeing none, what's the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair, actually, one more thing, and then I'll make a motion. Jim, this one position,
Yes.
that's a grant-funded position, correct?
That's a position that's funded with the expanded funding from the state for the expanded subsidized employment program. That's something that the legislature did this session.
Is that a permanent funded position, or is that a grant-funded position?
It will be reviewed again in the legislature next year.
And if the money doesn't, I guess here's a question, a direct
Yeah.
question. If the money doesn't come in, do we have to continue to
No.
have that position?
No, if the money doesn't come in, we'll review what we're doing at that point in time.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'll
But-
make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Jim.
But there's a great interest in the legislature in these kind of programs because they have been successful, and the counties have a huge interest in showing to the legislature that we can help people move to self-sufficiency.
Do you think that Proposition 47 might have a positive impact on this type of activity?
I can't comment on Proposition 47.
Okay, fair enough. All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, make a motion that we approve 14-15 budget augmentation and transfer 948,199 from the community service and workforce development activities and to add 1 FTE in integrated caseworker 1 to the schedule authorized positions for the budget 584.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next item. Mr. Espinoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the item that we're on this morning is item number 22. It's been approximately 6 months or so since Kevin O'Neill has come on board as our OES manager, and I requested him to review OES operations, to look at, more importantly, look at what things could be done better and what we can do to streamline services within OES. So I've asked him to give your board a presentation. He has a PowerPoint presentation for you. You should have a copy of that on your desk, and as soon as we boot the and focus that projector up, Kevin will start. So, Kevin O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As Ray said, I'm just kind of give you guys an update on what we've been doing, what's coming up, and just what's generally going on in the Office of Emergency Services, or OES. I can go ahead and start before this comes up. First of all, I'd like to introduce Chris Mangano. She is a new employee in OES. She's an emergency services specialist. She replaced Cindy Silva, and she's been on board for about a month and a half or so.
You want 5 minutes? We'll take a 5-minute break.
No, I went out there to the orchard. And
Hey, Anthony. Oop, we lost Matt. Do we have to have Matt?
Sorry.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get going.
All right. Well, again, good morning. Just what I was saying, so Chris is new with OES. We're getting a lot done with her on board, so we're really excited. And some of it we'll go over in some of these future slides, but I just wanted to take this time to introduce her.
Thank you.
All right. So first, I just kind of wanted to give a background of what OES is, what we do, and so just right off the bat, here's our mission statement. San Benito County Office of Emergency Services mission is to lead the San Benito County operational areas' collective efforts to protect life, property, and the environment by developing, coordinating, and managing programs that prevent, protect, respond to, recover from, and mitigate natural and man-made disasters and emergencies. Our philosophy is to be prepared to effectively manage any major emergency or disaster situation that may occur within the San Benito County operational area. And just as a little definition, operational area and county are basically the same thing. So operational area is a county. So what we do, we provide emergency management services for the entire county or operational area, including its 2 principal cities and all special districts and political subdivisions. OES coordinates emergency operation activities among all the various local jurisdictions and develops written guidelines and emergency plans. Mainly, we're responsible for planning, coordination, response support, administration, and communication between all the different agencies and jurisdictions in the county. We're kind of the go-between between the local and the state and federal. We work in a cooperative effort with other government jurisdictions within the county, so fire service, law enforcement, EMS, as well as private companies, PG&E, volunteer organizations, American Red Cross, and state agencies. To do this, we use a system that's known as SEMS, or Standardized Emergency Management System. Currently, there's 2 systems. There's SEMS, and then there's NIMS, which is the National Incident Management System. NIMS is mandated by law by the federal government and is actually based off of the California system, which is SEMS. And what it does is it gives a comprehensive approach to incident management for large-scale emergencies and disasters. It's based on the incident command structure and principles, so it sets a very defined framework that is adaptable and easy to use for any type of incident. And it's applicable to all levels of government and all disciplines. So whether it be a fire response or a multi-state disaster, it's used at all levels. It's actually required by the California Emergency Services Act that local government entities must use SEMS in order to be eligible for reimbursement. So anytime there's a state or federal disaster proclamation, if we're not following the system, we may not be qualified for federal reimbursements. SEMS is used to coordinate between agencies, to assist with the flow of information, the deployment and tracking of resources, and one of its biggest benefits is that it forces everyone to use common terminology. So rather than the police department using 10 codes and the fire department using their acronyms, it's all just common language. So there is no trying to figure out what everyone means, looking up the acronym book or the 10 codes. It's all very common, very easy to understand, which just streamlines the flow of information and personnel to better assist with the response and recovery activities. The county, as the operational area, is designated as the link between local jurisdictions, the cities, special districts, and the state emergency operations center, and operating centers of political subdivisions that comprise the operational area. In most counties, cities have their own operations center, and those communicate with the county's emergency operations center, which I will get into in a couple more slides what that is, and then we communicate to the state. Right now, how it works is we have an operational area emergency operations center. We communicate to the state regional emergency operations center, or REOC, and they communicate to the State Operations Center in Sacramento. And they'll communicate to whatever federal operations center is activated, if there is one. So there are 5 levels of SEMS. There's the field base, so that's the firefighters, the police officers, the ambulance crews that are on the ground. It's the local government, the cities, the operational area, the county, the region, and the state. And the reason the federal is not on the list is because SEMS only applies to the state of California. The federal follows the National Incident Management System, which is NIMS. And then below the pyramid is the basic structure to the incident command system, which is what SEMS is based off of. So there's defined management group, operations, planning and intelligence, logistics, and finance. So within every incident, all roles are clearly defined, and people know where they fit, so that the incident can be managed effectively. And then below each section of operations planning, logistics, et cetera, are groups, units, or strike forces and single resource units. The state is broken up into 3 regions. Coastal region, which is where we belong, which goes from Monterey and San Benito all the way up to Del Norte. The southern region, and the inland region. And then those are broken up into numbered regions, subregions. Our region is not broken up, but the southern and inland regions are. So I mentioned the Emergency Operations Center. The Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is a central command and control facility for large-scale emergencies or special events within the county. So anytime we have a large event or disaster, we will activate our Emergency Operations Center, and that's what basically kind of gives us the 30,000 feet view of what's going on, as opposed to a fire crew on the ground where they can pretty much only see what they're told from their radios or see what they can looking down the street. We're able to get the big picture. We're gathering information from everywhere, from the ground units, from the state, from the feds, so that we can get the big picture. We ensure continuity of operations. We're responsible for the strategic overview. We are organized and equipped to coordinate response efforts, to make decisions, and to gather and disseminate information. And we provide strategic direction and support to the field units. So whereas they may be focused on one incident, we're able to kind of cue them into the bigger picture, and perhaps they need to deploy somewhere else. The EOC is not a tactical unit. We do not tell them, fight this fire here by using this means. We are a way to coordinate information, personnel, and resources to support the ground unit. They do their own planning. They do their own operations, objectives, and goals. And we just are there to support them and to pass information up to the state. Within San Benito County OES, we have a disaster council. This has actually been a topic that I've been working on since I came on board because it has not been active since about 2006. We're hoping to get it back and going early 2015, just kind of put it on pause because of the holiday season. But what it does is it provides for the preparation and follow-through of emergency plans for the protection of persons and properties. It gives the general direction of the operational area's emergency organizations, including OES. And it consists of the following members, as you can see. The chairperson, who is the director of emergency services, the vice chairperson, assistant director of emergency services, and a representative from the board, as well as fire department, public health, county council, EMS, and the Office of Education. All entities will operate as an operational area for the response purposes as prescribed by, again, this is the Emergency Services Act, California Government Code 8559. And the Disaster Council is responsible for the development of the San Benito County Operational Area Emergency Operations Plan. And the Emergency Operations Plan, which I get into in the next slide, is the general guidance of how to respond to emergencies. We will probably be going through a rewrite of this county ordinance so that it better reflects the current positions. Right now, we do not have by title, an assistant director of emergency services. Mr. Espinoza is the Director of Emergency Services. We might just kind of clear it up that that's also the CAO, that the Assistant Director would be myself as the manager, and just be a little clearer of who fills the other seats.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, and, just kind of looking at the members, I don't see the sheriffs or Hollister police, and does it make sense, if you have someone from a board of supervisors, does it make sense to have someone from the councils, or?
You are absolutely right, and that's a typo. They are absolutely, the sheriff does have a seat in the disaster council, as does the Hollister Police Department.
Okay.
So I apologize for that. Any further questions on this? Or no. Keep going. Okay. So as I mentioned, the Emergency Operations Plan is what provides the general guidance for the response and recovery activities of the field-based units. Concentrates on large-scale disasters. We don't get into the minutia of the single structure fires, the traffic collisions. It is a multi-hazard or all-hazard plan. It covers multi-jurisdictions and by law follows the SEMS format. Plans are based on emergency functions. So there's a care and shelter function. There is a fire and rescue function. And so it breaks down for each function. There's 18 of them under SEMS. Who's responsible for what and how those, how we address those different issues in a disaster. And this is something I am currently working on. Our current plan is not so much a traditional emergency operations plan. It's kind of more of an emergency operations center staffing guidance. So it sets the framework for how the county is staffed to manage a disaster, but doesn't really get into the details of how we interact. And so that's something I'm currently working on. It's one of my biggest projects right now, and it will focus on the emergency functions, and so that it can be used more effectively in a disaster should one arise.
May I ask, Mr. Chair, how soon you think that will be?
I'm aiming for January.
Good, because a disaster obviously can happen anytime, and I envision that if we don't have that in place,
Right.
There'll be people bumping into each other, not knowing who should be doing what.
Absolutely.
So that will then come along also with some sort of like a drill or?
Yep, absolutely.
So.
And,
Mr.
oh, did I hear someone?
I was gonna chime in there, Mr. Chair, if I may. One of the things that I've been sitting down with Kevin on is to reenact or enact a formal drill with key staff, with the sheriff, myself, and to do that, just out of the blue. So it can be in the evening, it can be whenever, but we need to kind of prepare. Where do we go? How do we move forward? How do we handle the actual disaster? So I've asked Kevin, basically mission him to do that. So he's been working on the plan, and as soon as he firms this up, then we're going to take it to the next step and actually do a formal, kind of like a fire drill, so to speak, with the EOC.
Good. Now, is one of us, I'm not aware, sitting on this council?
Well, that's the concern that I had, both Kevin and I, we had discussed this, that the council has not been in use or hasn't met in years, so.
Really?
Yeah, it's been quite a while, I think probably 8 years, 9 years, somewhere out there.
Right, I think it was about 2006.
2006, so it's been definitely 8 years. So we need to reenact that. We need to get the language in there to get the key staff that Kevin had just mentioned, and then to meet, to basically go over these things with the council.
Good. I'm glad that's on the top of your list, because
It
I
is.
think that's so critical. I mean, obviously, that's what it's going to take, organization, to be able to react to something of that nature.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Patel?
Yeah, and Supervisor David Cruz probably would remember, but when we first got on the board, in this about 2008, 2009, we did have a simulation disaster, and it's the coordination between the CAO's office with the sheriffs, with Public Works, which is a key component, and how do you coordinate all those people, and then the politicians, where our role is very significant. Stay out of the way.
Stay out of the way. I remember. That's what I remember hearing.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah, they told us, shut up.
Yeah,
Sit there.
but I'm happy you're starting to work back because because each department needs to know who to kind of coordinate with and what their resources are available to whatever disaster and you could have different sizes of simulations and that's good that you're on board because it doesn't need we can't be dormant in this.
You know, there was an incident several years ago, and I didn't know whether I should get involved, but I started to head to town to get involved, saw a deputy sheriff, and he told me just what you said. Stay out of the way. So anyway.
It's not that we don't want you there. And you know, and you're absolutely right. And I'll kind of skip it forward a little bit right now because I am aiming to have this done. I do want to bring back the Disaster Council, which at least one of you will have a seat on, because it is very important. The Napa earthquake kind of opened a lot of eyes for everyone, and then again, the 25th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake did that as well. How the process works for plan development in this field is a plan is created or updated. It is then vetted through some means. In this case, it's going to be the Disaster Council, where the Disaster Council will figure out whether that's what fits the needs of the county and is realistic. A lot of these plans, you know, say, oh, we're going to have 12 helicopters come in, and you know, that's not realistic. We don't have any helicopters. The Sheriff's Department doesn't have a helicopter. And then from there, we moved to the training and exercise piece of it. And I actually just got off the phone yesterday with the state, and they're going to help come down to do an exercise with us in March. So by finishing this up in January, we can make sure it fits our needs, and then in March, we will exercise it. We'll be able to evaluate the plan to see if it actually does fit our needs. And then from there, we'll be able to do maybe a out-of-the-blue exercise to kind of surprise everybody and see where we really are. Because, I mean, the best training is a real disaster, but we want to get as close to a real disaster without having the disaster beforehand, so we know we're ready. And that's what we'll do. So moving on, San Benito is fortunate to be a part of a grant program that's known as the Urban Area Securities Initiative, or UASI. UASI is comprised of 12 counties, so Monterey, San Benito, up to Sonoma and Napa. It doesn't go all the way up to Oregon like the region does, but it's really focused on just that San Francisco Bay Area. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because there's a lot of great trainings that come out of it, a lot of great information, but it's very time-consuming. But we are starting to actually get something good from it. In the past, we haven't gotten any funds from this grant program. We haven't been able to host any trainings, and as I'll get to, we actually have 3 different training courses that are going to be coming here in December, completely funded by this grant program. We, for the first time since we've been added to this region, are putting proposals in for funding to fund emergency management, terrorist-related projects in our county. So hopefully we will start to see a little more benefit from being part of it. The grant program comes directly from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. So that's where the actual dollars are coming from. And it's intended to provide financial assistance to improve the capacity to prevent, protect against, respond to, and recover from terrorist or terrorist-related catastrophic events. So this is only terrorist-related items or incidences. There is obviously crossover, so just because we use monies from this program for, say, Emergency Operations Center, we can obviously use it for other incidences like an earthquake or whatnot. But as long as there is a terrorist nexus to the project. And San Benito County, although it doesn't really seem like it would be a huge target, there is agricultural terrorism. We are a soft target for that. There's really not much to do to protect against that, We just have to be ready to respond to it to mitigate any damages.
I have a question in relation to terrorists. The target sometimes is information technology.
Yes.
Are we still protected? And will this grant cover us for that
There
purpose
is-
as well? Because I know when our CAO was not in the CAO position, I was able to tour and see where we did get funding and we were protected. Are we still there?
Yeah. From the UASI, there was some funds, or there has been some funds that have streamed mainly to Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, but we were able to benefit as well with wireless technology that was tied to those two other counties. So we actually have a tower up on Fremont's Peak, or had one at that point, I believe we still do, that actually shot back down to the sheriff's office for emergency services. So if there was anything that, from a technology point of view, that failed, we would be able to utilize that link in case something happened from a technology perspective. From a hard line, we'd be able to use the wireless for that. So there was something there that was put in way back, I think it was right about my time when I first came on board. And then we actually have done a little bit more work with that group, adding some more dishes on there as well, so recently.
All right, thank you.
Right. And the other benefit is there's a lot of region-wide projects. So while we haven't gotten direct funds just for San Benito County, we do benefit from the overall region improvement. And in the past, Monterey and Santa Cruz, for the southern hub, which we're a part of, has kind of gotten the most benefit from it, but it's starting to change. So I've kind of been following the squeaky wheel gets the grease mentality with that. So it's starting to turn around, and hopefully it'll be getting better. So this slide is just to kind of give you a snapshot of what we're funded out of. There's two main grants that we're funded out of every year. And then, as I mentioned, UASI is another grant that we're starting to ramp up in. But the first two is the Emergency Management Performance Grant, or EMPG. That's what basically covers most of the salary for OES. The second is the Homeland Security Grant Program. And similar to the UASI grant, that is designed for Homeland Security activities, so terrorism related. And that's mostly used to buy stuff. So equipment for law enforcement, apparatus for the fire department. Most recently, it helped to fund the fiber optics project. And the previous year, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. But it was two rather big, the narrow banding project for the communications. So that's a great asset to us, and it's been starting to tick up. About 2009, it was cut significantly, and since then the amount's been getting bigger, and so we've been able to make a lot of great changes here in the county to help protect us from any kind of disaster. I already spoke towards UASI. Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This grant actually doesn't exist anymore, but we have an ongoing project we actually were awarded this grant in 2007, and it's still going. So this grant was to create a local multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. And the work was started with not my predecessor, but my predecessor's predecessor. And we're just wrapping it up right now. It's going to be submitted to FEMA here in the next couple days. I'm going to mail it in. And so hopefully we'll close that grant up. And as it says, funds go to disaster preparedness projects, first responder equipment, training, exercises, EOC equipment, communications, and then hazard mitigation, et cetera. The list goes on. So just some of the accomplishments that we've had in the 6 months that I've been here. Recently, along with Monterey County and Santa Cruz County, we hosted a workshop on 6 plans that were created in 2010. The workshop was held in Monterey in their Emergency Operations Center, and we covered these 6 plans here. So mass care and sheltering plan, interim housing, volunteer management, mass transportation and evacuation, mass fatality, and debris management. So these plans haven't actually been adopted by the county. These are kind of what will serve the basis for those emergency functions that I spoke to earlier. But this workshop was to kind of go through and see what's what in the plans is good information and what's bad information, what's out of date, because as I said, it was 2010 that they were created. And it's a great framework for us. It's a lot of contractor speak, but there's a lot of great information. They gathered a lot of the resources we need, and it's going to really save us some time. In addition to that, we successfully applied for the fiscal year 14 grants that I mentioned on the previous slide. We're continually managing the previous year's grants. We just closed out 2012. Participated in this year's Urban Shield up at San Mateo. We submitted the local multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan that I spoke to, as well as the list. And the list even goes on from here. A member of several working groups, working with the Red Cross to get our shelter agreements up to date. Really just building strong relationships with everybody in that we interact with the state, our neighboring counties, just so that we're not kind of left in the dark like we have been in the past. What we're currently working on, one of the big topics is we're swearing in all county employees as disaster service workers. So by law, all county employees are disaster service workers. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, employees weren't sworn in. So the same oath that you take, the same oath Ray, all appointed and elected officials take, all county employees need to take, and without that, they aren't protected in a disaster for workman's comp, for reimbursement, for even getting paid. So we're going through and we are swearing every single county employee in, whether they say they've done it in the past or not. And we're working with Joe Paul in the auditor's office to document it and make sure that those records are up to date so that we are covered. Because as it sits right now, we would have to, if there was a disaster, we would have to swear everybody in as they showed up, which is not very time conducive, considering we're talking about a disaster. One of the courses I mentioned coming in December, we're hosting a brand new hospital hazardous materials course. It's actually an old course that's kind of been rebranded and updated that includes Ebola. So it's going to cover patients who have any kind of hazardous material or infectious disease and how our hospital is going to treat them. So they're actually going to get in their hazmat suits. They're going to practice deconning each other. They're going to learn how to handle Ebola patients. And this is the first time this class has ever been offered in the state since it's been updated. And we've already got 20 employees from Hazel Hawkins that are going to be in attendance, as well as some of our environmental health county employees and public health and Red Cross. We are implementing a county CERT program. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. Excuse me, team. And that is a group of volunteers that it kind of does two things. One, it creates a group of volunteers who are prepared, that we can rely on. And two, it's a group that we can utilize in a disaster to help do minor activities, like searching their neighborhoods, checking houses, turning gas lines off. Just little things that can help lessen the load on the fire department and the police departments and sheriff's department. We are going to start our first CERT training class in January 21st, I believe. And it's an 8-week program, so it's about 3 hours a day for 8 weeks. And we've already had a lot of interest. We're partnering with the Hollister Fire Department. They have a lot of the equipment, and so it's going to be a big improvement because we don't have a very big volunteer base here in the county. We're also working with the large animal rescue group to improve our capabilities with evacuating large animals. As I stated, we're rewriting the emergency operations plan. And we've been working very closely with FEMA and Cal OES on a catastrophic earthquake, Bay Area catastrophic earthquake plan. It's a big project they're working for. They just wrapped up Southern California's catastrophic earthquake plan, and we've been meeting with them pretty regularly to make sure that they are aware of what's going on in San Benito. And as I said, the list goes on. The EOC exercise, trying to bring more training through UASI grants, monitoring and reporting on drought conditions, monitoring Ebola, et cetera. And here's some upcoming projects. On Friday, we're actually hosting a winter storm preparedness seminar at the Sheriff's and Public Works building. That's at, I think, 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock in the morning. You're all invited. I believe we sent the invite out to, I think, the general email. I'm not sure if it was passed on. We're working with the school system for disaster planning. As I said, reinstituting the disaster council, working on building our joint information center, which is where pretty much any public relations activities comes from in a disaster, as well as our continuity of operations plan, continuity of government, risk communication, which again has to do with media relations, and again, the list goes on. And lastly, this is the Emergency Services Act reference that we're mandated by, that I mentioned earlier. And so that's kind of just what OES is going on. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns you guys have. And I'm always available. You can call the office anytime if you just want to sit down and chat and see what we're up to.
Supervisor Barris?
Thank you. I have 3 questions. I want to know, Ms. Mangano, she's a emergency services specialist, but what is her role in all of this specifically?
Sure. So she's taken on a couple different projects as well as just general support. So some of what she does is to attend meetings in my place, but as well she's been working very closely with public health on the statewide medical health exercise, which is an anthrax-themed exercise. She helps with the little things like doing claims. And it's right now, because we're kind of in a transition period, not only with me as the new manager, but moving under the admin's office from the sheriff's office. It's kind of more of a duties as assigned. There isn't a very set work plan. But she's basically my right-hand woman. And I mean, everything's going great. It finally feels like we're really starting to make progress with having her on board. As I said, we were able to host that workshop in part because we had her on board. Getting this weather seminar on Friday going, in great deal thanks to Chris. So
All right, well, thank you for that. And the other question is, what is Urban Shield that we participated in?
Sure. So Urban Shield is an annual exercise that, again, is very terrorist-focused. Okay. It took place all over the Bay Area, more specifically the actual Bay Area around the water. But this year, the scenario was a terrorist attack at Moffitt's Field, where the terrorists were trying to get away, and they were traveling up through San Francisco up into Napa. And so my role in that was working with San Mateo County EOC. I was actually an evaluator to evaluate how they were treating the disaster. And Urban Shield is huge. There's so many different pieces to it. At Moffitt Field, they did a mass casualty incident functional exercise where the victims all wore the makeup, so it looked like they had actually been injured. And so there was that piece of it. Then there was the tracking piece of it. There was a donations management piece of it. And so it all kind of comes together just to simulate a big terrorist attack.
Okay, and my last question is, on your disaster planning for the school system, do you include private schools and also preschools, where there may be large numbers of children? Because I can tell you, when there's a disaster, that is the biggest concern is for little ones.
Oh, absolutely.
And young people, so by parents, and so
right.
What have you done for outreach?
So at this point, nothing. We haven't gotten a chance to start working on that yet.
But I hope you do.
We will. We absolutely will. You're right. It goes beyond the school districts.
Right.
It's any child, especially here with many of the parents working outside of the county. It's a concern because we don't know. They might not be able to make it back. So are these schools, daycares, whatever, are they prepared to keep the children overnight perhaps?
If nothing else, invite them to your whatever plannings or...
Oh, absolutely.
So that they can be as
absolutely.
prepared as the public school system. So.
Right, and as we start moving forward with the disaster council, the county Department of Education has a seat on it, and that's where I think we're going to start getting that conversation going. It was actually brought to my attention very recently by the gang task force that was brought up earlier. I was invited to that meeting, and they were concerned about their disaster plan. I was talking to some of the principals, the superintendents, and as it sits right now, they each have a disaster plan, but they don't know what each
The
other's
other
doing.
one's doing,
And it
yeah.
kind of came out that they were all evacuating to the same park, and we can't have 3,000 kids at the same park walking down the street. So that's kind of where that came from, and that was only really brought to my attention about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I believe. But again, that's on the top of my list because you're right. That's going to be everyone's priority. County employees and not county employees, it's what's going on with my family. And if we can't guarantee that, then we can't guarantee that our county employees are going to show up to assist everyone else. And that's just, everyone wants to make sure their kids are safe. So absolutely, you have my word that we will involve the preschools, daycares, and so on.
Okay, and thank you for your efforts. I think this is going to be a good plan, and I look forward to getting the final product.
Thank
Mr. Espinoza?
Yeah, one of the thing I wanted to add is on page 4, or the 4th slide, it talked about what else we do, and in there, I think the second item down is coordination, and really what OES does, they coordinate with the state if there are issues within our county, and in particular, if there's a city issue. So a good example of that was with the drought issues that the city of San Juan Bautista was facing in District 2. And there was a lot of issues with the actual, I think it was well number 1, where their water was actually really subsiding, and the other 2 wells that they had, there was extremely high arsenic or high nitrate levels. So what we had to do, both Kevin and I, is actually communicate with the state in order for the state to then help the city. So we have to be on point here with the county in order to disseminate that help from the state, even federal level, at the other jurisdictions within our county. So that did occur thanks to OES and what we've done here. And not only them, but there's also other individuals within the canyon that also had some problems that the state was assisting as well. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Is there anyone, member of the public, who would like to address the board on this item? Seeing none, I believe this was just a report, so we'll move on to the next and final regular agenda item. Mr. Espinoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Our last item on the regular agenda is coming out of our probation department. This particular item, it will be presented to you by Ted Baran, and basically he'll be discussing with your board the feasibility of looking at potential funding to actually do some work with the juvenile hall from a construction point of view. So we were looking at I think SB 81 to move forward with this, but I think the time, there's a lot of time constraints and other things that have kind of come up. So Ted here is going to explain this to you.
Yes. Good morning. Still morning. Mr. Chair, members of the board. So I think I'm going to do my best to unring a bell a little bit. The SB 81 grant came to my attention initially when I got here from Adam Goldstone, and that's when we were discussing some reconstruction of the rec yard inside Juvenile Hall. Prior to that, we had no idea what the limitations or requirements were for SB 81. When the grant announcement, the RFP came out, it was noted that it was a $3 million minimum that we had to apply for. And it started a whole other conversation in terms of what was needed for the juvenile hall. Our juvenile hall was constructed in 1992. At the time, it met all federal, state requirements for a juvenile hall. We are currently grandfathered in based on the date of construction. In looking at SB 81 and where we are with juvenile hall, there's a number of things that could be improved and should be improved for the juvenile hall, and some things additionally facilities-wise that in the next 5 to 10 years that we're going to need to do. Currently, I'm working with Joe Horwedel from Public Works in terms of developing the list. When I initially started looking at what we could possibly do, I said, you know what, we can use a new juvenile hall. Wouldn't be a bad idea. This one's been around for 20 years. It has some security design concerns. If you haven't been there, it has a linear bed design where all the beds are actually down a hallway. And that this was one of the last construction projects that maintained that design feature. Everything I know of since that time has actually had a modular design, which actually increases staff and youth safety and gives the facility a better opportunity for treatment and programming. So in looking at this grant, essentially Joe and I talked about what would be needed, and we'd have to dedicate a significant amount of staff resources internally, additionally some hard match for a needs assessment that would need to be conducted in a very, very short amount of time. And that would be approximately $60,000 of money from the county general fund with no guarantee that we would actually get the grant or the funding stream. It is a competitive funding stream. I've spoken with other chiefs across the state in our category who are also applying, and they have actually had maybe a year and a half of design discussions into this in terms of what they wanted to do with their facility or their grant application. So along those lines, I would be remiss. I would not want to spend county dollars on something that basically we wouldn't have a guarantee or even a really good shot of getting together and being awarded the grant. What I am aware of is that within this specific grant, SB 81, there are a number of counties across the state that have received funding under the first iteration, the first round, and I'm hearing that some of them have not spent that money, and they have about another 12 months to do so, otherwise it'll revert back. So the plan at this point between Joe and I is to, one, get ourselves in a position to where when we have another opportunity, we're already ready. I've heard the phrase that, being lucky is preparation plus opportunity. So the opportunity was here, but we're just not in a position to do this successfully or with a great amount of assurance of success for it. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barris?
Ted, would we need to do the needs assessment immediately. So there's no way that we could wait until December the 9th to go to this technical review meeting and then make a decision after that to see what our chances are.
No.
The needs assessment needs to be done yesterday.
Yesterday. It would need to be required as a submission for the grant, for the application. And so without a full needs assessment, we would be, I guess, dequalified upon technical review.
Okay, and are we sure that $60,000 is the amount of money? Could we possibly do this for a lot less? I hate to miss an opportunity, $9.6 million or whatever it may be for a much-needed.
For a much-needed facility.
Yeah. Is there any possibility that we could approve this for a not to exceed, but, go back and change our minds if we can't find somebody to do it for less?
In thinking about this, one idea, for this specific opportunity, I think it's possible. I don't think we'd be able to, one, we'd get the needs assessment and then develop a robust plan that would be competitive against the other grantees or the other applicants.
It is very competitive. As I was reading through it, boy, you better be prepared with your, the information that you give them. But again, I hate to miss an opportunity, but I know that we've been in transition. You're relatively new to our department, and so I can see how we are not ready.
I would venture to guess that, one, these things for juvenile halls and youthful offender rehabilitative facilities, as like local youthful offender rehabilitative facilities, they tend to come, from my experience, in like 4 to 6 year cycles. And so we can work with our juvenile hall now. I have an idea that I haven't run past Ray, so sorry for putting you on blast. But there's a way you can get kind of a preliminary needs assessment, which is much less costly, but gives us an idea of, one, where we're going as a county, what we're going to need 5, 10, 20 years from now. It's not as expensive as the entire full needs assessment, but then you can start to design what we need based on that. And then when the opportunity comes up, as soon as it comes out, we'll be able to move forward because we'll have a good plan structure in place already, and then we'll be able to get a full needs assessment and submit a great plan. Some of the chiefs I've spoken with across the state about their plan, I'm like, wow, okay, they've really put some thought and planning behind this, and the ones that haven't, actually I'm not the only one that took a look at it and said it's not going to be worth the headache, essentially, or the effort knowing that we're probably not going to meet the minimum qualifications.
Okay, and one last thing. Have we looked into partnering with another county for the funds? Is that because I know that there's opportunity to create a joint or a regional type of facility?
Yeah, yes and no. I've considered that. I am actually pretty good friends with the chief in Santa Cruz and the chief in Fresno. And one of the things is, years and years ago, before the construction of our juvenile hall, we had contracts and agreements with the surrounding counties. That's my understanding. And it actually led to all these issues about having staff on call 24 hours a day. Whenever a kid got arrested, we'd actually have to bring them up, wake them up from sleep, and then the staff would drive out to that facility. So there's those types of discussions. Monterey County's juvenile hall is relatively new. They're not even thinking about going forth. Santa Cruz's juvenile hall population is way below what their rated capacity is. And it's I wouldn't say newer than ours, but it's Chief Giraldo over there is not going for it. The chief in Fresno has a kind of different thing going on with his juvenile hall, and in Merced it's actually a much newer facility as well. So there's opportunities for that, but it wouldn't necessarily be for a juvenile detention facility. A number of counties across the state are actually looking at youthful day reporting centers, transition centers, different types of opportunities, and different types of structures based on the fact that their juvenile halls are still very robust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I just want to, add that, I appreciate your report and your candidness, and I completely understand that the timing just isn't right, but I'm confident that moving forward with the staff that we have in place, that in the future we will have a competitive application, and we'll be able to take advantage of those opportunities in the future. So, again, I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, I concur, and I think that I'm going to have to pass on this one, I'll be honest with you. And then hopefully down the road, with more working together and more understanding of our community needs, then we'll be more prepared and ready to go at the next crack.
Is there anyone from the public that'd like to address this item?
I'm Marty Richmond from Hollister. I wonder if Chief can tell me if there's a matching fund requirement. Maybe he said it and I missed it.
There is.
And what is it, a third?
5%.
Oh, it's only 5%. Okay, that's interesting. I just want to say on the needs assessment, when I went back and reviewed the library issues for the last library bond, 2000, and I reviewed every winning bid, so to speak, for all three things. I think there's 45 of them, new libraries built. The one thing I noticed is all the winners had really terrific, very thorough and voluminous need assessments, 160 pages, 170 pages, talked about everything from, the income stream for the various portions of the county to, their histories and so on and so forth. So these are enormous documents. But I did notice every winner, and I understand it's a different board and a different process, but my guess is they're all locked into the same thing, that if you get a good needs assessment, you really got a chance. If you don't have time to do a really thorough needs assessment, I do agree with them that the chances of winning are very low. Only a 5% match is a nice little low number. The library, I think, was a 33% match, if I remember. You needed to come up with a third to get the original library bond. So I do agree that a needs assessment, a good needs assessment is critical, not only to win, but a good needs assessment is critical to build the right facility. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else from the public like to address the board on this item?
If I could comment on the 5% match real quick, sir. As a small county, we were able to get a waiver, or eligible for a waiver, reducing the actual match to 5%. However, Joe and I were kind of crunching numbers, and our actual cash expenditures would have come up to about 15%. And so that was one of the reasons as well, looking at I learned a new term, FF&E, which was the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and additionally the architecture and stuff, those additional things. So it was we would easily meet the 5% required match.
One other thing that I want to point out is the sustainability. I think that has to be very well spelled out in this grant application, and that'll take some thought.
Yes.
So I just recommend, Mr. Chair, that we move forward with a preliminary needs assessment, because in the event that something else comes up, we do need to be prepared. I'd hate to miss another window of opportunity.
I would
But
too.
I understand why we would need to bypass it this time.
Yeah,
so.
I would not want to submit I don't do anything half-step when I can.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
With that, I will poll the board. Do we want to go into closed session, or do we want to break for lunch?
Closed session's going to be about an hour, if not more.
An hour?
Yep.
All right.
For lunch, Mr.
With
Chair.
that, we will break.
I
for
wish I
lunch.
was. Attorneys have no sense of
1:30.
humor. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll go vote and come back. Yeah.
What's that?
You'll go vote?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't think it was going to be 5 minutes, but I didn't think it was going to be an hour either. So 1:30.